Hello everyone and welcome to the third part of the full stack Angular and NestJS e-commerce application that we are building throughout this series, and I have got really good response from you folks so far. So without further ado, let's actually get into it. For those of you who are watching this particular part for the first time and have not watched the previous videos, I would highly recommend watching it from here. And I'm just gonna quickly brief what we are doing today, but I'm not going to go through all the things that we have done in the previous videos. So first of all, we are building an annex mono repository, or we are working with a single mono repository, which means that our front end and back end application are both inside one GitHub repository, which makes it easier for us to manage the code base, also to deploy. Everything becomes much easier when you use annex mono repositories. Then we are also using the front end application being built with Angular. Of course, it's built with Angular 19, but if you're watching this after Angular 20 has been released, I don't think much is going to change because we have SSR, we have signals, we have all the good things that you would want in an Angular based application. Then we also have the NestJS Backend application in the project as well, which works flawlessly with Prisma that is used to communicate with the Postgres database. So we have our database right now deployed on Neon or neon.tech, and here you can see the pet market project. So we have a live database, and we also deployed last time the application on Cloudways as well. So both on the first video we deployed the backend, and on the second video we essentially deployed the front end as well. So here you can see that if I go to products, I can essentially see all the products coming via GraphQL from the NestJS application from the database, and I'm also able to search stuff from here as well. I'm also able to add items to the cart. The cart gets filled. I can go to the cart, change the quantity of this, finally review it on my order summary, and go to Stripe to essentially pay this. And you can see the whole process is super smooth, and I can just fill the information here and then my order would be created. If I hit back, it says payment failed with all the information here as well. So this is super cool. Now going back to the architecture, as I mentioned, we are using GraphQL to communicate from the front end to the back end because it makes it so flexible for us to get the data exactly like how we want it. In the front end, we are also using NGRX signal store to manage the state, which is, I think, one of the best ways that you can manage states in your Angular applications today. And in the last video, we also set up payments with Stripe, as you just saw on the deployed version. But today we are going to take it to the next level. We are still remaining the usage of Firebase within our project and some finesse, as they say. So to reiterate, in the previous video, we did the product list, we implemented the product card component, and you saw all of them when you go to the products page. This is the list essentially, or the grid, and we have the product card component right here. Then we also implemented the searching products as I showed you, and then the cart store as well. You saw us adding items to cart. We also implemented the cart component itself, where you can see the whole cart, increase or decrease the quantity of the items, and then the Stripe payments as well as the checkout success and failure pages as well. So we implemented all of that in the previous video. Now in this particular video, we have a lot to cover, and I did not want to make this more than 3 parts because that's going to take a lot of time for you to follow and for me to create as well. So in this particular video, we are going to end all of it. And as I mentioned in the first video and the second video as well, we are not going to handle how to add products or remove products as an admin or as a vendor, so to say, in this project, because I think that's fairly easy when you know how to work with NestJS. We are handling much more complicated things that you probably will not find on YouTube in tutorials. Having said that, we are going to essentially start with updating the schema to add another status that is called payment required. Right now we call it pending, but we are going to call it payment required. So when you go to Stripe, this will be payment required. If you have paid successfully, then it becomes pending because it's going to be delivered essentially, and then the other statuses come in. We are also going to add this as a Prisma migration. We are also going to handle the success and failure of the Stripe payments a bit nicely with the finesse that I was talking about, and you're going to see what I mean by that. Then we are also going to implement the home page with feature products. If I go here right now and go to home page, you're going to see that there's nothing here. For example, this is how it would look when the application is finished. You should have the home page having the feature products right here. You should also have the products page here as it is right now. Then you'll also see in the header the logged in user. Here you can see my image, my name as well, and when I click here, I can essentially go to my order. So if I would have any orders, they would show up right here. For example, let's say if I have my cart items like this and I go to pay with Stripe, I'm going to quickly fill in the values, and now if I hit pay here, you can see that we have the payment successful with the order here, and you can see the order ID here as well that ends with BC3. If I now go to my orders, you can see the exact same order right here, and if I click here, you can see the same details here as well. So this is going to be the final product. A couple of other things that we'll also do is we are going to use something called RX method, because I saw a lot of you mentioning that we should be using RX method since we are using signal store. That makes our lives easier. So I'm going to actually implement that in this particular video. We are also going to implement, as I mentioned, the Firebase Google and email authentication. We're going to also provide or use the NGX env builder because we want the Firebase values to be in the environment variables and not exposed or committed with our code. We can do that very easily with the backend, but when it comes to the front end Angular application, it doesn't really work out of the box. So we are going to use this particular builder for that. Then we are going to create the orders with the authenticated user so we can retrieve them back using this particular page, and that requires us to do some work. Finally, we are going to ensure that everything works with SSR like magic, and we are going to also enhance our deployment process. So we are going to write a bash script at the end which easily deploys our application, so we don't have to juggle into a lot of folders and start the PM2 processes and whatnot. So we're going to make it super easy. Well, with that said, let's actually get into the code. So first of all, you need to clone this repository. If you have not already done so, you should find the link in the description of this video, and there's a specific branch that I want you to basically check out into. So first of all, if you have only cloned this repository, I want you to go here in your code editor, and inside here make sure that you are at the root of the project, and here you need to do git checkout, and here you can say checkpoint 2. Make sure you're on this particular branch because this is where we are going to start everything with. The second thing that I want you to do is, since we are going to make some changes to the database, it's really important that we have either a local database that we're connected to or something that's not the production database. By that, what I mean is that if I go to Neon console where we created our database, and if you followed the video, you also probably have it right here. You can see that we have this pet market database right here. And if you go to the tables, you can essentially see that we would have a lot of data already here, a bunch of orders created, as you can see, some products as well, a bunch of order items as well. So all of this actually exists here. Now imagine that you already have your application on production and you want to make changes. How would you go about that? Would you make these development changes directly on your production database? Well, I don't think so, or you probably won't have your job. So what you would probably want to do is to either, as I said, run a local database or do something different or connect to a different database. In our case, I'm going to use Neon's feature, which is creating a branch, which essentially means that I can essentially go here in my main branch, which is right now. And this is not the Git branch. So this is not your code repositories branch. This is a branching system that Neon handles within its own platform. This allows us to create a branch from this state, which we published in our last video, so we can build on top of it. So here I can create a new branch. I can say feet, and here I can say user orders, because that's essentially what we are going to build in this particular video, and a lot of other things as well, but let's name it like this. And what this means is that it's not only going to shift the schema or copy the schema, but also the data as well. And this is going to copy all the data up to this particular moment when I'm creating it. So I'm just going to create a new branch here. Now you'll see that we have this data right here. And what I need to just do is copy the snippet from here, and I want to change my database link in my environment variable. Now I want you to go to your code, and you're gonna go inside apps, pet market BE, and here we have the env file. So you open it and you should be able to see the three variables here. I want you to just copy the database URL one and paste it. And then I want you to comment the currently active database and then replace the value of one of these to enable it. So here, this one that I've highlighted just now, this one is the branched one that I just created. So this is not the main one, this is the branched one. So you save it now, and then you can go inside the folder, which is the apps pet market BE. So if you were at the root of your project, you would do cd apps pet market BE, and inside here you want to run npx prisma migrate status. Now understand this, that this is connected to the branch database. So this is going to see if all the migrations are applied, and essentially there was just one migration and that has been applied already. So this is working with our branch database because it was copied from the main one. So it only makes sense. Now that we have this, we essentially are going to go into Prisma and schema.prisma, and we're going to add something here. We're going to add a new order status right here. So previously we had pending, started delivery, and delivered. In this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another status here, and I'm going to say payment underscore required, as I mentioned earlier, and we're going to save this one. Now here in the code, you can see that the default value here is pending. You can essentially leave it just like this for now because we are only creating the order status right now. Now, if you go up here, you are also going to see that we have this pending right here. You could change it to payment required, but I'm going to keep it like this. But if you want to change it, I would recommend to not do it in this particular migration, but do a new one. So this order status enum is already created because sometimes it makes some issues around that. So I'm not going to do it at this time. Now we are going to create a migration for this particular change. And not only this, I want to also make one more change. And that is whenever we have an order deleted, we also want to remove the order items as well. So imagine this, whenever an order is created, the items in the order are also created just like this. So let's say you are adding two different products. That means the order would have two different order item references here as well. Now, if you delete an order, what happens to the order items in the database? Well, by default, nothing. They stay there. And that is problematic. What we want to do is we want to delete the order items as well. So for this, what you can do is you can go here in the order relation, and here after the reference differences, you can essentially say on delete, you're going to say cascade. This means that if the order gets deleted, the order item also gets deleted. Now, if for some reason the product gets deleted, which this order was bound to or order item was bound to, do we want to do the same thing? I don't think so. If you accidentally delete an order and the user has the orders list already, the order should not be removed from their account. It should still be there. And the product might be pointing to something that doesn't exist, but still the orders information should still be there. And I think that's really, really important. So we're going to keep it just like this. Great. Now that we have these changes, I'm going to show you how to create a down migration alongside creating this migration. And by that, we mean that if you wanted to go inside an environment and want to apply all the migrations, you could do so. But let's say you wanted to roll back to a certain migration. That's where down migration comes in. If you look at this folder right now, it only has an up migration, which is the default migration, like creating the table, etc., etc. But the down migration is essentially the exact opposite of this one. So that would remove these constraints, that would also drop the tables. So just the opposite of creating tables, of course. In our case, we are going to now create the down migration. So if you go to the official documentation of down migration, and you will be able to easily find it, just try to search Prisma down migration and you'll see the link. You'll see that there are a bunch of ways to do this, but essentially two major things. One uses a shadow database that we don't have at the moment, and the other one doesn't really need that. It just looks at the schema itself, compares it with the previous state, and then generates a down migration. So here is the script that you need to copy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy it from here, and then I'm going to go inside my terminal, and in here I'm just going to do this. And notice that I'm still in the apps pet market BE folder. You need to be inside here to run this. Now here I'm saying generate a down SQL from Prisma schema Prisma to Prisma schemas Prisma, which is essentially just, comparing it with the previous version of itself, and then just writing the down SQL here. So if I hit enter here, you're going to see that this is going to generate a reverse of what we just did. That is, we generated an enum order status, and also we did this on delete cascade. All right. So what does it say? Here it says cannot reach the database server at here. That's interesting because a moment ago it was doing that. Let's have a look at our neon stuff here. I think it could be because of the connection pooling. We may have to remove that, but let's close this. I'm going to double check the branches as well. If I go to main and look at here, we are using the pooler here. And when I look here in the env variables as well, that uses the pooler. So that should be fine actually. Now let's try to run this again, and I've not changed anything at all. So let's try it. Well, actually now it passed, so no issues. So that means it was just something temporary. So if I look at the down SQL right now, you're going to see that here it says begin create type order status new. So it generated the order status, as you can see here. It also added the statements for the cascade stuff as well. So here you can see all of that as well. So on delete, restrict, on update, cascade. Now what I want to do is I'm going to now generate the migration script, and that is based off of the documentation itself. So here I'm just going to run this particular command, and we'll give the name as well. So I'm going to copy this, paste it here, and I'm going to give the name add order status, and we are also going to say delete order item cascade. So a big name, but it is still shows us what we want to do here. And now this is going to connect with our database that is in the branch, and it should apply the migration there as well. So now you can see that the migration was applied here. The migration folder was created as well. And now what you should do is you should move the down SQL file right here, which means that whenever you want to roll back or do the down migration, you're going to essentially run this. Now you'll see that this migration is essentially the up migration, which adds the payment required. And in the down SQL, it's going to essentially remove the payment required, and it's going to set, for example, this without the payment required, so to say. All right, now that we have applied the migration, let's actually test this out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my branch. So let's quickly go to branches, and here I'm going to go to feed user orders. Now we have this overview and tables here, right? So if I go to tables, and you can see that here we are in the branch right now, and let's try to see if I have an order with this particular ID. Let's say I'm going to copy this ID, and I'm going to go to order item, and here I'm going to filter by the ID. So here I'm going to say where the order ID equals this thing. If I apply here, you're going to see that we have these 4 records. So what happens if I delete this particular order? Using cascade, these should also get removed. So if I go to order here, and let's try to find here the same thing. So this is the order with that particular ID. If I click this, if I delete one record, and let's see what happens. Now if I go back to order item, and if I try to say the order ID similar to what we had before, apply, you can see that we don't find any particular order because the order item got removed alongside the order itself, and that's what we wanted. Yay, success. Now that we have done this, we are going to essentially go ahead with implementing the backend for orders. So we can get the orders, we can update the order, and we can also remove the order. And we want to do that because we want to be able to do that when we have the success or the failure from Stripe payments. And to be honest, this is really like the finesse part of this whole application. This is something that that does not really come under MVP. You could have all these sort of elements or these orders be in the database, but I want to have something that is production ready. So what we are going to do now is we are going to essentially go to the order resolver. So we're going to go to source app, and we are inside the pet market BE here, and we're going to go to orders, and we're going to go to order resolver. Now in here, you're going to see that we have this find all query, which is of orders. If I go inside here in the service, essentially, you will see that we have find all that doesn't do anything. So here we are going to say this should basically return. So this Prisma dot order dot find many. And in here, we don't want to say a where because we want to get all of the results, but we are going to include all of these things. So we have something like this. Now let's quickly save this. And now I can essentially add a new tab. So remove the excess ones. And from the project's root, I can run npx nx run dash many. And I'm going to say the target is serve, which essentially means that we are going to start the front end and the backend server together. All right, now that our backend is running, let's go to the browser. In here, I'm going to go to localhost 3000/API/GraphQL. And here we have the get orders query. I want you to copy this, and you can pause the video and copy it just like this. And that means we are making the query to orders endpoint. We're trying to get the ID, total amount, status, and items from here. Now, what's important here is that the ID, total amount, and status, this is part of the order table. If you go to Neon and if you go to order, you can see here we have the ID, we have the status, we have the total amount, and we have the payment ID and created at, updated at, etc. But what's important here is that the total amount, the status. And here we're getting both of those two things alongside the ID. If I hit play here, you can see now we get the orders. And this is just from the API that we just implemented with the find many. Now, as I mentioned before, the beauty of GraphQL is that you can essentially want or not want data, and you can essentially remove it. And now it will just give the ID and items and not the status and order. But I'm going to just put it back as it was before. And as I mentioned before, I hate the feature that this whole UI, the GraphQL application, has not been updated for more than 4 years now. And we have this bug where we try to type something and then a block shows up. So I don't really like it at all. But here you can see that we have all the orders that are coming from the backend right now. The next thing that we want to do is we want to update the status of the order, and we want to be able to do so pretty easily. So I already have the GraphQL sort of API here that we should be implementing, but I'm going to show you by first implementing the endpoint. So first of all, let's go to the resolver here. In the resolver, we already have an update order mutation, which says update order input. And this should come from the update order DTO here. But if you go into this file, you're going to see a couple of things. First, this says the ID is a number. It's not. Essentially, it should be a string, just like this. This should also be saying string, and this should always be there. If I'm updating a particular order, I want the ID of it. The next thing I want here is the status, because the only thing that we are going to update here is the status. And you should be able to import the order status from Prisma client. This is where we should be importing it from, and that's going to also be the status here. Now, what you could also do is you can remove this partial type from here, because I don't think we really need it. So I'm going to remove this as well to make this a bit cleaner. Now, one thing really important that I want to highlight here is when you saw the int here or the string, that is essentially a type that comes by default from NestJS GraphQL. But order status is not a NestJS GraphQL type. It is essentially something that comes from Prisma clients. So NestJS GraphQL package does not understand that at all. And we need to make it understand what the order status is. By default, if you know, this is an enum here. So it is based on the Prisma schema, has the payment required, etc., etc. But we need to go to the entities, and here we are going to go to order entity to make NestJS GraphQL analyze what this order status is. So here you're going to come all the way bottom, and you are going to write this thing right here, which is register enum type. And you import this thing from NestJS GraphQL. So you can essentially import it from here, save the file. And now you have just said that there is an enum inside GraphQL from NestJS, and the enum has the value of order status from Prisma. So we have connected this enum's value with GraphQL. So GraphQL now understands what we are talking about. Great. Now that we have put it here, we're going to go to orders resolver here, and right after the argument here, I'm also going to give the type what it is essentially. So here I'm going to say the type here is this. So it's going to be update order input, which is exactly this same thing, right? Now, why this cries is because the service expects us to provide a number, and we are essentially giving a string. So here you can see string is not assignable to type number. So we're going to go into update here, and we are going to change this to string. Awesome. Now let's have a look at how we can update this. So we are going to say this dot prisma dot order dot update here. And since we are only updating one single order, that's what we want here. So we are going to say here where, and in the where we are going to just provide the ID. So we are trying to find an order that matches this particular ID. Then we are going to say the data is going to be whatever we are passing from update order input. And finally, when the result is returned from here, it should contain exactly this thing. So it should have the items, and it should also have the products here as well. So we are going to say include items and then include product true. So let's save this now. And we are also going to save the orders resolver as well. Now, one thing when I was running the server, I noticed that there was a warning that said NX daemon is not running, node process will not restart automatically after changes, which means that whenever we save the file for the backend, it's essentially not going to restart our process. So I'm going to stop it. And now I'm going to run nx run -many t and then serve. Now, if you don't have nx installed globally, you may have to run npx nx, but essentially the command is the same. All right, so our server is started now. So I'm going to go back to my browser, and in my playground, I'm going to try to get all the orders again. So let's see, we have orders here. Now you can see that this particular order right here with this ID has the status set to pending. So if I go to my update order status here, you're going to see that we have this update order. And if I look at my code here, the code also says this mutation is called update order, which is the name right here. So in my browser, I'm going to change the ID to what I just copied from the other get orders from here. And now I can also say the status is payment required. Okay. Now when we get back the data, I'm saying ID status total amount and updated at, but essentially you can also send back other data as well as we have here. So you could also say something like this as well. So if I wanted, I could go here and just below this line, I could say this. And if I hit play here, you can see that we get success here. The status has now been changed to payment required. You also see the items here as well as we are getting them back. If you remove this, then we are not going to get them back, as you can see right here. I'm just going to refresh now. And again, if I hit this, we have the payment required. If I go back to my orders and try this again, you're going to see that that one is now gone. If I try to find that one with this particular ID, let's see what happens. So if I try to search it, go to that particular item, here it is. And you can see that this particular item right now has the payment required. So that's the one. Now that we have this update working fine, we are going to implement the removing of an order. So this one is supposed to be removed. In this particular situation, we don't want to remove any order that is in delivery or pending or started delivery or finalized. We want to only remove the ones which are unpaid, so to say. And the situation for that one is that when you go to Stripe and you cancel it, you come to this particular page. When you come here, you want to immediately remove the order from the database because it's useless now. No one is going back to that particular order because if you try to go to Stripe again, it creates a new order. So we don't really want to do that. In that particular case, we just want to remove this particular order. So first we are going to go to order resolver, and here you can see we have the remove order right here, which essentially requires an ID. So I'm going to change a couple of things here. One, this is supposed to be string and not number. This is going to be also a string, which means that this is also going to say this is a string. Now this is supposed to be remove unpaid only. So I'm going to rename this for now, at least for clarity or more readability. So whenever someone reads, they know that we are only talking about remove unpaid when this remove order is called. So you can also say remove unpaid here if you want. So remove unpaid instead of remove order. That probably makes much more sense, and not update. It should be unpaid. And now that we have this, let's implement the logic here. For the remove unpaid, we have a couple of situations where we want to send different sort of results, but they have a specific format. So when someone tries to remove an order, and let's say that item is already removed, we would just say success. We won't say that this item was already removed. Why are you removing it again? Because that doesn't really provide any value. So if the order is already removed, we say, okay, it's removed. If the order is unpaid, then we remove it. And then we say, all right, we have removed it. But if the order has progressed in the status, which means that it's not unpaid anymore, it is pending or started delivery, then we say, no, we cannot remove it. And that we also share the reason for why that's the case. But before any of that, we should create a DTO or a data transfer object here. So we are going to say here, delete order response dot TS. And then here we are going to have this particular code. So notice that we are calling this order deletion response. Okay. You could also call this delete order response for the same naming convention. And here we are providing three different properties. We are going to say success, which is going to be a true or false. Then we have the ID of the order. And then we also have an error, which is optional here. And you can also see that here we specify that as nullable for GraphQL. Now this is important. Now that we have this, we go into the order service and we try to check everything one by one. The first thing we do here is we change this to async, and from the function here, we say this is going to return us a promise of delete order response. So we need to specify it just like this. Now first we try to find the order itself. So we say const order equals await this dot prisma dot order dot find unique. So we only want to find one particular order, and we are going to say where the ID matches the order. If we don't find the order, that means that the order has already been deleted. So we just return. We are going to say success is going to be true, and we are going to say the order ID is going to be ID. If that's not the case, then we are going to check what is the status of the order, which means the order exists. So here we are going to check if the order dot status is, and here we can say order status coming from Prisma client dot payment required. If that's the status, then we essentially delete it. So we say await this dot prisma dot order dot delete, and in here we provide the where ID, so where ID, and then here we can also say return success is going to be true, and then we have the order ID set to the ID. And I know that this can be simplified further, but I'm just keeping everything super clean and easy to read. Now finally, if that's not the case, then we just say return, and here we say the success in case of this is false, the order ID is essentially the ID, and the error is that we have the status something other than payment required. So here we can say order is not in payment required state, and we can also make it like this. So we can use the variable itself. So here we can say order status dot payment required state. So let's save this now. And now we should have the remove API done, but I also want to type this a bit better for the GraphQL side of it. So in the resolver here, when we say remove unpaid, we should not have the order being sent, because if you look at here, this returns a delete order response. So we should also say here that this is going to return us the delete order response, just to type it nicely for GraphQL Playground and GraphQL schema as well. And if you want, you can also say here that this function returns back this exact thing, but since TypeScript can infer it, I don't need to provide it by default. All right, I think that our remove order should be done. So let's try it out. I'm going to go to Playground here, and let's try to get a particular order. So let's say if I say get orders here, we have this particular thing which is in pending. So if I copy this order ID, and if I go to remove order, here you can see I can provide the ID just like this. And if I try this, it should say that it's not possible because it's in pending. So here it says this because we have this as the wrong name. So it should be remove unpaid instead of remove order. And I'm going to refresh this because of this block. And now if I hit play, it now says cannot query order ID on type order. Interesting. So something did not really work well. The mutation here says delete order response. Okay, I'm going to save this, and I'm going to double check this schema here. So if I go to docs here, and if I go to remove unpaid, this does says that it will return delete order response. So I think this should be fine. Now if I try to hit play here, you can see that it works. So it was probably something related to the server not being refreshed. Now you can see that it provides us the order ID, the success, and also the error that this is not in payment required state. Let's say we change this same order to payment required state. So we go to update order status. We essentially change the ID here. So we are updating the same order with the payment required. So if I hit play now, you can see that now this became payment required. I'm just going to go to remove order and do the exact same call without changing anything. And that should say that this is success, true. Now it could delete it, and the order ID here as well, and no error, which is what we wanted. If I hit play again, since it was already deleted, it should still say success true. Hey! So we have essentially finished this particular part. We also added the migration. Now we are essentially handling the success and failure and updating or deleting the order, but our API actually is ready. Now we are going to implement the front end side of it. Before we go to the front end side of it, you will notice that if I go to my checkout service here, you're going to see that when we create the particular order, we use the items and the total amount. We don't really set the particular status. And in the database, you know that we only have set that is going to be pending. So let's generate a new migration. So I'm going to go to schema.prisma, and here I'm going to change this payment required, or actually this pending, to payment required. Let's quickly save this. I'm going to go to the down migration example, copy this code again, go back, and notice still that we are inside the apps market BE folder. So you need to make sure that you are here. You can just copy paste this command here, and this now generated the down SQL. So if I see here, here's the down SQL created for us, as you can see. And now I can copy this particular command and run it. And now I can say npx prisma migrate dev name, and here we can say make payment required as default order status. So let's quickly add that. All right, so it actually ran the command, but as I shared in the previous video, when you have the server running, it can't really generate the Prisma client for some weird reason on Windows. So you need to basically do it this, and then you need to run the command again, and it will just generate the Prisma client for us because the migration already has been applied. So you can see here that already in sync, nothing was applied, but we generated the Prisma client now. Now I can move this down SQL to the migrations here. So let's quickly go here, and I'm going to move this down migration in the folder. Now, if you look at the migration SQL, you can see that we altered the table and we changed the status to be payment required as default. That's what we wanted. By that, I mean, I would have to essentially go here and provide the status, which means if I go to order service create here, I would have had to change it here. But now since that's the default one, I can essentially remove this and the default status would be applied. So I don't need to worry about this at all. Great. Now that we have this, we are going to update the status when we have the successful payment from Stripe. So first I'm going to run my server again, and then we are going to go to the checkout success page. So let's go to pet market web source app and then checkout success.component.ts. Now in here, we can essentially create a function that we can call. So here we want to get the order order. But if the order has the status payment required, we need to update that particular order. So what I'm going to do is, as I was recommended by other folks to use Rx method, we are essentially going to create an Rx method here. So here we can say something like get and update order. And here we are going to say this is Rx method. And this should come from ngrx signals rxjs interop. So here you can essentially go and say rx method just like this. Now this rx method can be called just like this. And inside here, I'm going to say pipe. And then inside here, I'm going to have a switch map. And the first thing that I want to do is to get the order. And here I'm going to essentially copy this whole thing. And let's quickly do it like this. Here we should receive the order ID. And here I can also say that this is going to be string. So we are going to provide the order ID, which is going to be of type string. And we are going to then return this from here. And then we are also going to use merge map, or you can use map essentially here. And in here, we're going to get the order itself. So instead of calling all of this, I can essentially go ahead and say this dot get an update order and just pass the order ID. Keep it simple. You can see that nothing is an error here or everything looks good. But what we want to do here is the question. Now, when it comes to getting the order, we have something in the order store for that, but not for something here, which is the update order. So we're going to go to the get order here, and we're going to create a new method for updating the order. So here I can say update order, and here it's going to be ID string just like this. And then you can have a status, and the status will be order status. That should come from Prisma client just like this. And then we can have the update call here as well. Now, what I can actually do is, instead of using it like this, because we are also going to update the other methods with Rx method as well, but I'm going to show you an example here. So here I could use Rx method here as well. And this is going to take the order ID, which is going to be string. Or if you just want the TypeScript to infer it, you can just leave it be. And here I can go ahead and say pipe. And now here I can use switch map. And then what I want to do here is similar to what we had here in the get, but we're going to use mutate here. So I'm going to say here Apollo dot mutate, and then we can give the type of the data that we're going to get back, which should be update order, and it should be order with items and essentially one single item instead of the array. Now in the method, we need to provide two things. We need to provide the mutation here. We're going to provide it in just a second. And then we also have to have variables. So we need to provide the ID here and then also the status. So ID and status. Now where do these ID and status come from? They should come from here. So it should be ID and status just like this. Now you can see that here it says ID any, status any. So you can give the type right here. So Rx method here, you can see we have ID string and status order status just like this. Now you can see the right types here as well, as you can see now. Now when it comes to what is going to be the mutation, you can essentially copy it from the GraphQL playground, which I just showed you. So if you go here and you go to update order status, you can see we have this whole thing right here. So you can copy this and you can scroll above here and then you can create it like this. As always, you can just pause the video and look at what's happening. So I'm going to say const update underscore order. Here we're going to say GQL, start with the backticks here, and then here you can paste all of this. Now in here, you need to provide the variables for this. So you can remove all the comments from here or essentially not copy it at all. And I can remove all of this as well. Now what I can do here is I'm going to provide the variables here. So first one is going to be ID, is going to be of type string with an exclamation. So it has to be there. And then we are going to have $status. So the status variable, and then it's going to be also of type string or actually order status type, just to make sure that we use the enum, and it's going to also be exclamation here. Now instead of this, you can essentially go ahead and use the ID, and instead of this, you use the status. Good. Now I can essentially come down here and use this particular GraphQL query, and I can save this. And now I can go here and say return this dot order service or order store dot update order. And here we need to provide the order ID, and we also need to provide the status as well. And this essentially is an object. So here I need to say ID should be order ID, and here we should essentially get back an order. So if I mouse over it, this is a result with the order key. So here I can say order like this, and now this one should essentially be an order with items. So this one essentially should resolve an order here. And if I try to say here order dot, and here you can see data, errors, loading, network status, and partial, which is the Apollo query result. So are we missing something here? Let's see. I can see what the issue is. We have the get order, which essentially goes ahead and does a tap. It doesn't really return anything back. So we need to change that. Apart from doing all of this, it essentially should go ahead and do a map here as well. And then we can here say data, and we can return back here data dot order. So this needs to be there. Once you do so, then this will become the order itself, as you can see now. And now I can say order dot ID just like this. And I also want to update the status here to payment required. So I can say order status, and here I'm going to say payment required. So let's quickly import this from Prisma client. And now I've imported this from Prisma client. So I can essentially pass this, but this should only happen when we have the status payment required. So, and I'm actually going to change this from payment required to pending. And this should only happen when we have the status that is payment required. So I'm going to check if we have the order.status is order status dot payment required. If that's the case, then we want to do all of what we just put here. Otherwise, we just return null. So it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to save this now. And again, I know that this can be simplified quite a lot. I think one of the things that we could do is if we changed all of this to Rx method, we would probably be not requiring this at all. But we don't want to complicate this too much. So I'm going to keep it like this for now. So now in our case, when the component is initialized, it will check if the particular order that we have right now has the status payment required. If yes, then it's going to update it. Otherwise, it's not going to update it. So let's have a test around this. We're going to get some orders and we are going to try to update their statuses. So if I try to do get orders, you can see that this one has pending. So first we change this to payment required temporarily. So we go to update order status and we update this just like this. Now you can see that this became payment required, right? Now what we can do is once we come back from payment stripe, we essentially go to the success page with the order ID, right? So that's what we are going to do. So I'm going to go to my application, and even before trying anything out, I want to see if everything is working as expected. So the front end application is working. Yes, it is. So if I refresh the page, go to products, I can see something is breaking. Let's have a quick look. Something doesn't really work and I wonder why. Okay, I just refreshed it with a Control-Shift-R and everything seems to be fine. So if I try to add 2 items here, and if I go here, proceed to checkout and go to Stripe, it essentially would land me back to the success page with a particular ID, right? Now let's try with an order ID that doesn't really exist just to test things out. So if I say 22222 here, hit enter, let's see what happens. So I'm going to go to inspect here now, and I'm going to go to source, and you can see that nothing is being displayed here, which kind of makes sense, but we also probably would see some error. So let's see if I put a debugger here, you can see that we have one debugger point here in the update order. I also want to go to the checkout success page. So checkout success component, and here I want to go to this particular place, right? Now, if I hit play here, you're going to see that it comes to ng on init, comes here, comes inside here, and you can see that the order ID is not there because we have order ID in capital. That's what's wrong. So I'm going to change this to order ID with a small d and then change the parameter here as well. Hit enter. And now you can see that we don't really find the particular order, but that's fine. I'm going to refresh again. And now if I go here, we see the order ID. The order ID is there. Now it tries to get and update the order using this ID, right? So it tries to go here, and now we are essentially inside the Rx method. We don't really want that. I'm going to put a breakpoint right here and then right here as well. Now I'm going to hit play. So it comes inside here with the order ID. It tries to get the order. If I hit play, it essentially fails this particular order, which is fine. Now I'm going to use the right order ID. So I'm going to hit enter now. Now it comes here inside, goes here, goes here. If I hit play, it comes into switch map. If I hit play, it should get the order, right? So you can see we got the order now. Now in this particular order here, you can see that the status here is payment required. Okay. So it comes here, and then once we check that the order is payment required, we go ahead and then we go into updating the order. So it tries to go inside updating order, which is in the store now, again, which is an Rx method. So I'm going to hit play now since I already had the breakpoint here. So we come here with the ID and with the status, which should be pending. Now it's updating this with the particular variable status, pending, and ID here as well. Now if I go to my playground and if I copy this particular ID and if I go to getting the order just to see what is the status right now, you can see that this is payment required, right? But from the front end, when this call should be successful, it should become pending. So if I hit play now, hopefully everything goes well. And if I go to my playground again and just hit play, you can see that this is pending. So our success function is actually working perfectly. Whenever someone tries to come to this particular page, they're going to make this API call, the GraphQL API call, with this payload update order status, and they're going to send the value, and then we are going to get back the data with pending, right? Now, if I refresh this page, we should not make this call update order status at all. If I refresh now, it's going to come here, it's going to go forward, it's going to go here, and now when it comes to this particular part, the order status is already pending. So it should not actually make this call at all. So it goes here and just returns null. Good. That's what we wanted. So the success part is working perfectly fine. Now let's talk about the failure part here. For the failure part, we need to go to the backend. We need to also go to the checkout service. So we're going to go to checkout service here. And here you will see that for the success, we do change the order ID, or we pass the order ID, but for the failure, we don't, or the cancel, we don't. So we are also going to do the same thing. So when we go to the cancel page, we essentially remove the item from the database because the payment was canceled. So I've now saved this, and now we are going to implement the deletion part. So first we are going to go to Pet Market Web, and in here we are going to go to the order store, and in here, just like the update order, we are going to also add a query for remove unpaid order. So here, let's call it remove unpaid order. This should require us just the ID. So we don't really want anything apart from the the ID. So we are just going to have a string here. We're going to get the ID as a string here. So if I mouse over, you can see this is a string. And now we can create the deletion mutation. So if I scroll above here, we can essentially say const delete unpaid order equals GQL backticks. And in here, we can provide the deletion query. Now, again, you can pause the video to copy the remove order query here. So you can see this is the mutation that we want to have. So remove unpaid, and then we should have the ID and whatnot. So when I go back here, I can paste this just like this. I can say this would accept an ID of type string with an exclamation. So it should always be there. And then here, I'm going to use the $ID just like this. And we can remove this from here. Now that we have this delete unpaid order, I can go down here, and in remove unpaid order, I can essentially use this guy right here. In our case, we don't really want the status to be sent. So I'm going to delete this. And I think that's actually pretty much it. Apart from this, I just want to go ahead after the switch map to tab, and I'm just going to say console log unpaid order deleted with the data. And I'm also going to say in case of error, I'm just going to do a patch state. Now you could use tab here. You could also use tab response later on as well. It's up to you. But what I will do is I'm just going to keep it like this. So let's quickly save this now. And also in the case of not getting an error, we should do a patch state setting the error to null. That's something that actually is forgotten quite a lot of times by me. So I'm going to actually do it like this. So the error here should be set to null. The loading, if there was a loading, that would be set to false. But in case of a successful one, we just set the error to null. Now that we have this, let's go to the failure component or the checkout failure component. And we are going to essentially implement it. So it gets the order ID from the request and essentially can then delete that particular order as well. For debugging purposes, I will also go ahead and log the value of the order that's created. So I'm going to go to backend here. I'm going to go to source, app, checkout service here. And once we have the order created here, I'm just going to go ahead and say console log. And here I can say order created for Stripe checkout. And here I can essentially say order.id. I'm just going to put the ID here. So not too much of the information here. All right. So let's create a particular order. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to products. Let's say add 2 items, go here, proceed to checkout, pay with Stripe. And that should essentially create an order for us. If I go to my backend now, you can see on the console, we have order created for the Stripe checkout. And this is the ID of the order that we just got. Good. Now, if I go back from here, it should go to the cancellation page with the order ID because we updated the code. So if I click back from here, you can see here we get cancel, and then we also got the order ID as well. Great. Now, how do we delete the order from here? For the order deletion, we are going to go ahead to the pet market web. We're going to go to checkout failure component, and here we're going to read the URL as we did before. So first of all, we are going to inject both the things. We are going to inject the order store, and we are also going to inject the activated route. So let's quickly add both of them. Now we are going to say ng on init here, and we can say here it implements the on init. Then we can quickly say we are going to get the order ID by saying this.route.snapshot.queryParam and get order ID. Notice that this should be exactly as what we saw in the URL, so has to be case sensitive. And here, if we don't have an order ID, then we just say no order ID found. And then we can quickly go ahead and say this.orderstore.delete unpaid order. So if we go to the order store, the method that we added at the end is remove unpaid order. It should be something like this, not delete unpaid order. So here we have the remove unpaid order. And if we do so, then it's going to start removing the order. And here we should also be able to see the console log as well. So if I try to go to my page actually, and if I refresh, you're going to see something interesting. You may see the console log here on the Node.js console and perhaps also on the front end in the browser as well. So if I save this now, let's see what happens. So here you can see that we already got this unpaid order deleted on the server side, on the Node.js side, and it deleted it automatically. And now if I go to my browser, you can also see the unpaid order deleted here as well. So it deleted it on the backend and it deleted it on the front end as well, which means that we are essentially making 2 API calls. Do we want to make 2 API calls? Well, maybe not. Do we want to do it on the backend or do we want to do it on the front end? Well, I think we have mixed emotions there. When I talked to different people, some people were okay with doing this on the backend. Some people were not really, because they were like, no, you're deleting some stuff on the backend. Maybe that's not the right thing. So let's say we don't really do this on the backend, but we only do it on the front end side. So no server side rendering in this particular situation, which means that we can essentially go to our component and tell it to only run on the front end. So here I can say something like platform ID equals, and here I can say inject and then platform underscore ID, using which we can identify if this is running on the backend or the front end, or to rephrase it on the server side or on the client side. So here I can say if, and here I can say is platform server, which is coming from Angular common, and I can provide this dot platform ID here. If that's the case that this is the platform server, I just want to do return. I don't want to run it. I don't want to go ahead with any of this at all. So if I save this now, you're going to see that the page is going to be reloaded, but we are not going to see anything here. If I go back to my browser and refresh, you're going to see that it comes here here, and now it moves forward because this is not the platform server. This is the client side of it. So if I go here, you're going to see that this now makes the call and should be able to see the log here as well. So unpaid order deleted is right here, as you can see. However, no logs on the backend. If we flip it and change to is platform browser, then it's the opposite of it. If I refresh now, you're going to see probably here that we have the backend running it. So if I remove this guy from here, you will probably see the API call right here. If I go to my browser and refresh, you can see that now we have the log on the server side and not on the client side. So if I go to my browser, there are no logs here that essentially show that we have deleted the order. So that's what we wanted. Again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to change this back to platform server because we don't really want to run this on the server side. We want to run this on the front end or on the client side. Great. I'm going to just quickly clear this, refresh this, go to console and see my good old console log. That means we have deleted the order, which means if I try to go here and try to go to get order and go here, we will potentially not see an order that is payment required, so to say. So let's try something. I'm going to go to get orders, get this order. I'm going to quickly go here, go to the get order API and quickly fetch this single order, so to say. Now this is pending at the moment, right? I'm going to change the order status via this ID and I'm going to change it to payment required. You can see that now this became payment required. Now if I copy this particular ID and if I go to my cancel page and if I go ahead and do this, let's see what happens. You can see that it says unpaid order deleted. If I go here, it says success true, order ID is here and error is null. Okay, that's good. Now if I try to go to the playground and get order again, the same one, you can see that it can't return null, which means that this is not in the database. Good, that's what we wanted. So we verified our API calls work fine. So we have made a bunch of changes, and before moving forward, I want to commit my code. So I'm gonna git commit, and here I'm gonna say feature checkout update or delete order with respect to Stripe payment. And I think that's a good start for us. Now let's proceed with implementing the home page. So here we have the home page having essentially nothing. So we are going to implement the featured products on the home page. So I'm going to close the files here and then I'm going to go to pet market assets. And if you don't know about this one, you can find the link of this particular repository in the description of this video, of course. Then you need to go to pet market web, source, app, and inside here you will find home. I want you to go and copy the home HTML just like this. And then inside, I want you to go in our project, go to app inside home and just paste it like this. Great. You'll see that there are some things that are already failing here because there's a bunch of things like product store that's not here at all. So we need to implement all of that. Now I want you to go back to pet market assets and copy the home component TS as well. So just copy this whole file, go back to home component and paste it just like this. Now you're going to see that the TypeScript is okay and the HTML is also happier. So I'm going to save this now. And now if you go to the home page, you're going to see that we have this nice little layout with welcome to pet e-commerce. We have the feature products. We don't show anything at the moment here. And then we have the pet market here. So we essentially need to implement the feature products which are shown on the home page. So in order to do so, first we need to essentially go to the backend to implement it even before we go to the front end and update the product store, because we would need to have something here or we need to update something here to get the feature products. But let's go with the backend to essentially implement that first. So I'm going to go to apps, pet market BE, source, app, and here we are going to go to the products resolver right here. And where we have this find all method where we have this products as the name, we essentially are going to introduce a new argument here. So in the find all, add @args, and here I'm going to call it featured, and this is going to be optional, of course. So here you can say that we have this, and this is going to be of type Boolean, but then also you can say that this is going to be nullable true as well. Now we are going to call this featured, and this is going to be of type Boolean, just like this. And I missed something here. This is supposed to be type, and that's supposed to be just like this. Good. Now that we have featured here, we can essentially pass it just like this here, but the function does not accept it at the moment. So I'm going to go to the service itself, and here we're going to introduce a variable called config, and the config is going to be of a particular type. So this is going to have featured as Boolean, and by default this is going to be an empty object. So the featured could be there or could not be there. So I'm just going to say this is optional, and if you want you can essentially take this type out somewhere, and you can also say something like, I don't know, type find config, and here something like this as well if you wanted to, and then you can use it just like this. Now that we have this, we can essentially say where, and here we can say if the config.featured exists, then I want to say is featured because that is one of the types, or this is one of the properties of a product, and this is going to be config.featured, or you can directly say true, so to say. And if this is not the case, then after or otherwise we just say undefined. So we don't really pass a where in that case. So this is a conditional. If we have the config.featured, we essentially say get all the products which have is featured true, otherwise basically get all the products. So now that we have this, let's also save the resolver as well. Now that we have this, let's go to the playground. And in here, I'm going to add one more. So let's call this get feature products. So I'm going to copy all of this. I'm going to go here and I'm going to say here, or actually it doesn't really come here. We should have something like in here featured, and here we can say true, something like this, right? I'm going to refresh now. And now if I send it, you will see that we only get a few. I think we get about 6 or 4. So only 4 of them are here. And now if I say false, it essentially would send back all of them because our code is actually stupid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this better and say if the config.featured is not undefined, then we use config.featured itself. Otherwise, we just use undefined. So I'm going to save this now and we're going to try this again. In this particular case, I should not get all of them. I should only get a few of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So 16 of them, as you can see right here. If I change this and remove this completely like this and hit send, I get back all of the products. So all 20 products. Okay. So if you use featured true, it essentially gets back these 4. If you use featured false, it gets back 16. And if you don't send anything, it essentially gets back all 20 of them, which kind of makes sense. Now that we have this, let's actually implement this in the front end. So I'm going to go to my code base and we are going to go to the products store. So pet market web, I'm going to close all these files and then source app and stores product.store here. And then we are going to create a query for get feature products. So here I can say cons get featured products, and this is going to be GQL backticks. And then this is the query. So we use get feature products. We have the featured variable of Boolean, and essentially we just send those values, right? So I'm going to go down now and we are going to add one more thing with the RX method. So load products, search products, we are going to add something called load featured products. And I think I would probably rename it to get featured products, something like this. So let's call it get feature products, and feel free to change this one to get products. Alrighty. So this one is going to be RX method. And since this doesn't require any ID or something, we can just call void here. Then we're going to say pipe, not pope. And in the pipe, we can say switch map. And here we can say apollo.query, and we can give the type here. So this is going to actually have products of type products or an array of products, just like this, right? Then in here, we provide the configuration. So here we say query is going to be get featured products, and then the variables are going to be featured. And we can also provide the featured right here. And now that we have this, essentially, it should not be void. It should be a Boolean. So we pass the featured just like this. Now we are also going to have a tap here. So I'm going to actually do it like this. So we tap, we do data, and then whatever products we get back, we essentially send this back. And we are also going to have the error set to null here as well. And in case of error, we also set the error message just like this. So let's quickly save this now. Now we have a get featured products with RX method available. So we're going to go inside our components and home. And in the home component, you may already have seen this thing right here. So we're going to uncomment this and we're going to rename this to get featured products. And this requires us to pass the Boolean here. So we just say true and let's save this. Now, if you go to the browser and refresh, you can see we have the featured products. Yay! So the only featured products that we are getting back are these ones, which essentially should have the is featured true. So if I refresh now and look at the GraphQL API and look at the response, or actually expand from here, you should be able to see the is featured true for all of these products. Nice. And again, since it's using the same product card component, you can essentially add items to cart from here as well. So everything works flawlessly. Now that we have the homepage implemented, we are going to go and implement the authentication with Google now. For this, I'm going to go back to my code here and then I'm going to essentially commit the code. So I've done git add dot. Now I'm doing git commit. And here I can say feed home add featured products, or we can say implement home page. So now you need to do is you need to run npm install @angular/fire, and you also need to install another package called ngx-env/builder. We need both of these things for our project. We are going to use Angular Fire for authentication, but for working with Firebase, we need Firebase credentials. And for that, we essentially need to store them somewhere, and we don't really want to store that in the Git code or to commit that. So we need to have the env files storing those variable values, and that is essentially going to be a bit of a problem with out of the box NX Angular builder. So we are essentially using a different builder to provide env variables, but we are going to get to that point a bit later. While these are being installed, we can essentially go to Firebase and create our Firebase project. For this particular tutorial, I've already created a pet market project, so I can essentially go there. And once you come here, you want to create add an app, and you need to select the web version of it. You might see this a bit differently, but essentially you need to create a web application within your project, and then you just need to follow the steps. Once you do so, you're going to see see that in the authentication tab, you need to go to settings and enable the Google Auth. So you go to settings, or essentially, I think it's sign in method. So you come here, you need to make sure that you have the email password enabled and the Google one enabled as well. So both of these should be there. Once you have enabled that, you need to go to project overview and click this web part. Once you're here in the project settings, you need to scroll all the way down. You will see that you have the pet market web app right here. And then you'll also see down there that you have the configuration here. You will see the Firebase config object here, and you need to copy all the values from here, and we're going to paste them in the env variables. For this, what I want you to do is to go to pet market assets repository, and then inside here, you'll see that inside the source folder, you will find an env file. Once you open this file, you'll see that we have all these variables that you can use. So you just can copy all of this. You need to go inside pet market web, and inside here, you need to create a new file called env. So make sure you're inside here, and then you can click here, click this new file, and then say .env, and then quickly paste this file here as well. Now ensure that this file is also ignored. So here you see that this is not ignored in this particular context. So you need to go inside the git ignore at the top and just go all the way down here and say .env has to be ignored. And then you'll see that this would change to gray, which means that we are not going to commit here. Now I'm quickly going to go and I'm going to paste the values of these variables. And once you do so, you can also save the env file. Now that we have saved this, and you can see that the Angular 5 project has been also installed, we can go ahead with the environment variables stuff. So for the NGX env builder, what you would want to do is first make sure that you have stopped all the servers. Then you go to your project JSON in the pet market web, and then you try to find the instances of Angular devkit/build Angular. And here you can see that I have 3 usages of it. So I'm going to replace all of this with NGX env builder. So I'm just gonna replace all of this, save this now. And then we also need to provide the prefix for this environment builder, which means that you need to go to options, and inside the options, just after scripts here, you can say something like NGX env, and then you'll say prefix, and here you can say ng app, which is also the default value, but this is fine. And if you want to change it, you can change it here. Now you can see that all of the variables that we have here are prefixed with ng app, which is the default value. So make sure you have this as the same. Now what I want you to do is to go to the pet market assets, and in here you're going to see in the pet market web we have environments folder, and inside here we have environment.ts. So I want you to copy this whole file and then go back to your project, go to source app, and in here environments, and then replace this file. So you're going to see we just added this Firebase object, which is super important. So it needs to be exactly the same. Now what you'll do is you're also going to copy this for production as well. So go here, in here, and then you can paste it just like this. So we need to make sure that we help it understand it. You can see that the TypeScript is not really happy, and that is because we need to move this guy inside src or the source folder. So make sure you do that, and let's quickly save this file as well. Now when we go to environment TS, you can see that this is fine. And if I go to production TS, you can also see that this is fine as well. Good. Now that we have this set up, we can essentially go and configure the Firebase. For this, we are going to go to app config TS, just like this. And in here, we are going to go ahead and right after this Apollo, we are going to say provide Firebase app. And since we have never imported this, it's going to be the first time. So here I can say import from, and we can say add Angular/fire/app, just like this. So here we should have provide Firebase app, just like this. And then this requires a factory function, which essentially should return initialize app method. So you notice that we also import this from Angular 5 app. And in here, we need to provide the environment.firebase, just like this. So this should contain all these values. But I'm also going to go and put a console log here to just print the value once, and we can remove it afterwards then. So I'm just going to say environment.firebase, just put it here. And the second thing that we also need to provide is the authentication. So here I can say provide auth, and this is not imported as well. So I'm going to actually copy this, paste it here, change this to auth. And here we should have something that's called provide auth and then get auth as well. So in here, I'm going to say provide auth. This also takes a factory function. And here we just say get auth, and that's pretty much it. So I'm just going to save this now. Now, when I run the application, you're going to see the Firebase console, but once you see it, you can just remove the console log from here. So I'm just going to run nx run many-t serve. Now, when I refresh my application, you're going to see that here we show the API key, and we also see all the variables right here. Good. And you can see the values right here as well. So you can see API key, auth domain, project ID, all of these here as well. Now you can remove the log from here. Now what we are going to do is to implement the login and sign up pages and the functions for essentially doing all of that. So before anything, we are going to create those components. So I'm going to go inside the folder. So here I'm going to do cd ... and here I'm going to go to the workspace root. And now I can say cd apps pet market market web, and inside here I can say source app, and now I can create the auth components here. So I can simply go here and say nx generate component, and here I can say auth/login, because we are going to create the login component, and /login. So essentially it's going to create the login component inside the login folder. So I'm gonna hit enter on the nx Angular component, and here you can see we have auth login login. And now I can also do the same thing for sign up, and then we can say the same here. So auth sign up. And the final thing I want to also create is a service. So I'm gonna say nx generate service or nxgs, and here I'm just gonna say auth/auth. So it's going to create an auth service inside the auth folder, and this should be schematics Angular service, not NestJS, because we are talking about Angular here. So now we have the auth service here created as well. Good. So first of all, we are going to go ahead in the auth service, and here we are going to get the auth from Firebase. So here we can say auth equals inject, and here we can say auth, and you can see that this comes from Angular/fire/auth. So this is important. Now the first thing that we are going to do is to implement login and sign up via email. So if you want to do that, you can essentially implement it yourself as well. It's really easy to implement, but I'm gonna quickly do it here. So the email is going to be string, the password is going to be a string as well, and this function is going to be an async function because we'll have some awaits here. Then we can put this in the try catch. So here we can say try const result equals, and then here we can say await, and here we can say sign in with email and password, and this comes from Angular Fire Auth. As you can see, this requires a couple of things. The first thing here is auth, then the email, and then the password. So this dot auth, and then we say email, and then we say password, and finally when we have the result, we say result dot user. So we send it back. If something goes wrong and we have an error here, then we do console dot error, and we say login error, just like this, and then we say the error here, and we also throw the error as well. So let's quickly save this, and now the sign up is going to be the exact same thing, but it's going to be create user with email and password. So it's the same thing. Now we are going to implement the Google sign in. So here you need to have this thing right here. So we essentially use the Google auth provider. We first create a provider, then we say we are going to sign up with this Google provider. So we provide the this.auth and then this Google provider. Okay. When we do this, it's going to open the sign up or the sign in pop up from Google automatically. Then we'll get the result and we'll send it back. So it's quite similar to the email implementation for login. The difference being that we first get the Google Auth provider and then we use the sign in with pop-up, because the sign in with pop-up can be used with LinkedIn provider, Google provider, GitHub provider, and whatnot. Then we are also going to implement the sign out feature here as well. And here we just need to use the sign out method that you can find here from Angular Fire Auth. Once you do so and you await it, you're sure that this actually worked and now you have signed out. In this particular situation, you may also want to take the user to the login page, or you may want to take them to the home page. I think it's up to you. For the sake of simplicity, once we log out, we are going to redirect to login page, but from the header where we implement the logout button. Now that we have implemented this, let's actually go and set up the routes here. So we have the login route, we have the sign up route. So we need to go to the app route TS or the app routes TS here, and we need to register these routes. So we are going to create the route for login here. And here you can see that we say path is going to be auth/login. We are importing this since we are at the app folder. We say /auth/login and then login.component. We get the module here and then we say login component. Similarly, we go here and say auth/signup, and then we say sign up, and here we say signup.component, and here we say sign up component, just like this. Now that we have this, I want you to go to the pet market assets, and in here you're going to see that we have this components and then header folder here. And if you look at here, we have the header auth HTML. So I want you to copy all of this. So I'm gonna copy the whole file here, copy this, and then we are going to go to our components, header component, and here you'll see that we have 3 list items. So this is the home, this is the products, and then this one is the cart icon. I want you to put after this the whole code that we just copied. Here we have 2 list items when the user is not signed in, and when the user is signed in, we essentially show a drop down menu. Now let's quickly implement these things so we can go ahead and use that. So first let's go to header component TS, and in here we are going to get the auth service. So we can say auth equals inject, and here we import auth service. Now we are going to say current user, and you can say $, and here we can say this.auth. And you can say current user. Now we did not really implement this current user in the service, so let's go there. So we can either create a property here that says current user, and here we get the user function and we provide this.auth. So here it should be user. I don't know why I removed it completely. So the user should come from Angular Fire Auth, and now we have the current user observable available for us. Now if I go back to the header component TS, you can see that this is fine, good. And we are also going to create is drop down. What was the name of the variable? It was called is drop down open. So we are going to create this, and we are going to call this false by default. Now we are going to create a couple of functions. We have toggle drop down, get user photo URL, and get get display name or get user display name. So we are going to start with toggle dropdown. The toggle dropdown simply looks like this. We essentially take the variable, we negate the value of it, and then we assign it to the variable itself, which will basically toggle the dropdown itself. Then we'll also implement the logout function, which is used right here. So if I go here, I'm just gonna paste this particular code. And if you look at it, it essentially just says this dot auth dot logout. So this goes into the auth service, and this is the auth service right now, which calls the sign out method from Angular Fire. So our component goes to the service and service goes to Angular Fire. So that's what's happening here. When we click logout button, we also set the dropdown to false. So it essentially closes when we click it. And that's pretty much it. Now let's also implement the get user display name function. Here we are going to get user or the variable of type user, and you need to import it from Angular Fire auth, or we'll get null in this case. As a result, we should just send back a string. Now, if we have the user, then we use the display name, or we try to access the email and we essentially split it with the @sign. So I'm going to use this, and then anything that comes before the @sign, we essentially use that, or we just send back a string that says user. So it's always going to send back a value. Now for the user's photos, I want you to pause the video and copy this particular function. If the user already has a photo URL, and again, this is using the Firebase user here. If the user has a photo URL, we use that. Otherwise, we go to uiavatars.com that has an open API, and here we essentially get the user's name and we pass it. When we pass this is going to use the initials. For example, for me, Mohammed Hassan, it's going to just use MA, and then it would just return that value. Now, if I go to the HTML, you can see that everything here is essentially happy. So I'm just going to save this now. Now, if I go to my page here, you can already see that when we refresh, I see this header, but that's just because we already had that as a login. If I click there and log out, you can see that it works flawlessly. Now you can see that when we are not really logged in, we see both of these buttons, login and sign up. If I click login, I essentially go to login works. If I go to sign up, I go to sign up works. So right now you should be in this particular state that you should see these buttons out of the box. Now that we have the header in place, let's quickly go to implement the login and sign up pages. So I'm going to go to auth, login, and login component HTML. I'm going to quickly copy the whole file and go to pet market, and here I'm going to paste this whole HTML. Now if you look at the HTML, it's pretty simple. We have a bunch of simple HTML elements, but we have a form here which has two inputs, one for email, one for password, and then we also have a submission form or login, or we just say continue with Google, which essentially should log in with Google. We have to implement this function, by the way, and a link that redirects to the sign up page. So simple as that. Now we also go back again to pet market assets, and I go to login component TS, and I want you to copy this whole file because I don't really want to spend time on coding all of this. Now look at what this does. This essentially has two properties, email and password. For both the inputs that we just saw, it has an onSubmit function. When you submit with this onSubmit, it goes to auth.login with the email and the password. So it goes with the email and password login in this particular case. If it's successful, it goes towards the home page. Otherwise, it logs the error, right? Now, when we go with Google, it uses this.auth.google signin. So it goes to the auth service and uses the Google sign-in method and does exactly the same thing. Then moves to the home page. So I'm just gonna copy all of this. I'm gonna go to our project and go inside here and then just paste the whole file. Now, again, I would recommend you to look into error handling, more of it, showing a toes when there's an invalid email or password, but I've kept the tutorial simple so you can handle the edge cases yourself. Now, if I go to the HTML, everything looks fine, which means that if I go to my login page, this is what I see. So here you can see the email, the password, the login button here. When you provide all of these values, this button should be enabled, or you continue with Google. So if I click continue with Google here, you can see that automatically this opens this modal for me and then signs me in because I already provided it my consent before. So that's why it doesn't really ask me, but for you, it should ask the first time. But you can essentially log in easily with Google and see your image as well. So if I click login again, here you can see continue with Google is super easy. Now, if I click sign up, it also takes me to the sign up page. And that is because the login component here also includes the router link, and we are using the router link right here, just like this. So now that we have the login component here, the sign up component is essentially exactly the same, but with few differences, so to say. So I'm going to go to pet market assets, copy the sign up component HTML, go into our project, paste it just like this. And then I'm going to go to the sign up component TypeScript file, copy all of this, go to sign up component TypeScript and paste it just like this. So everything has been copied. Everything works as it should. And now if I go to the sign up page, you can see the exact same thing. So login and sign up, both of the pages seems fine. If I go to sign up, continue with Google, it also logs me in as I said before. And there you go. You can see it working fine. If you want to try out the user avatar thing, you can also look at this as well. If I go here and if I say the photo URL or this, I can essentially remove all of this and save. Now, if I go here, you can see automatically it uses my credentials to give me this avatar as an image. Nice. I'm going to put this back so I can use my photo URLs as well. Cool. Now the authentication works at least for us logging in and logging out, which is super easy as you can see. But now comes a bit more difficult part where we want to create the orders for the user so the user can get those orders later on as well. And that means that so far we have not really done anything with the user ID. For example, if I go to my table here, you're going to see that each order has a user ID column as well, but we never filled that at all. But since we were smart from the beginning, we essentially had that in the Prisma schema. So if I go to Prisma, if I go to the schema.prisma, you can see that the order always had this user ID with a comment that Firebase auth UID will be here. And the reason why we have this as an optional property is if there are guest users, we don't really need this user ID, but we still need to be able to work the whole thing as expected. So there should be guest orders, guest payments as well. But if the user exists, then we need to create those orders based on the user ID so we can get them later based on the user ID as well. So we need to change a couple of things here and there. But the first and foremost thing that we need to do is to know how to send this user ID to the backend when we are creating an order and then when we are getting back the orders as well. So that's really important on how to do that with Firebase. And since this is a really delicate matter of working with something that relates to the user, we can't really do that on the front end. We can't really create orders of the user on the front end because that means that we are allowing our API to get exposed by anyone that can just pass any ID and then we create the orders based on that ID. So that's not really something that we want. What we want is we need to create the order of the user who is logged in. And that is where the authentication of the front end to back end communication comes in. So I've tried to put this whole flow in form of a diagram, which is the whole Firebase end-to-end authentication flow. Now, if I summarize all of this for you, and you can skip the rest of my explanation, the idea is that the front end never sends the user ID to the backend when it tries to create an order on behalf of a user or when it tries to get orders of a particular user. Whatever is bound with a particular user, the front end should never send the user ID. And by that, I mean, if anyone gets access to the user ID, then they can essentially do anything with that because the backend API is exposed. Instead of that, the front end would always send the token that it retrieves from Firebase. It's going to send the same token to our backend. Then the backend will go to the Firebase and will evaluate if the token is valid. And if yes, whose token is this? Is this Ascent's token or Mosin's token or Saad's token? Whatever. It's going to try to find the user based on the token and then will act on behalf of that user. That's the short explanation. If you go to our database, you're going to see that the order table has this user ID. We have not used it at all so far. The idea here is when you try to create an order, you essentially follow this whole process and the backend itself analyzes from the token what user is this and puts the user ID here. So no one can take actions behalf of another user. That's the whole idea. Now, if you try to look at this in depth, what happens is that first of all, the user has to log in. So on the front end, the user tries to log in. The login essentially is done directly with Firebase. Firebase sends you back a JWT token. The JWT token is then set in the auth service itself. So this is still front end. So auth service has in memory the value of the token. This token can be saved in cookies, can be saved in local storage, doesn't really matter, but the auth service has access to it. Now let's say the user tries to perform a flow that requires authentication. That means getting the orders, for example. So if I am here and if I try to click a button here that says get users orders to go to the users orders list and see the list of orders, that means that we are going to essentially trigger a function, let's say get user orders. And this function is most likely going to be in the order store, which is the NGRX signal store. Now, since the order store does not have any idea of authentication, it's going to request the token from auth service, the token that we got previously, right? So it's going to go into the auth service and will say, give me the token. The auth service sends it back the token to order store. And now we have this token here on the order store level. The order store now can make the API call, the GraphQL API call, which says, give me the orders of this user having this token. So the GraphQL query will require the token to be sent. This token will be sent to the order resolver in the backend, which is our controller, so to say. So the order resolver will then verify the token. It's going to take the token. It's going to go to the Firebase service that we are going to create in this video. The Firebase service gives directly the user ID back. It validates it, confirms it, and it's essentially confirming it from the Firebase itself, of course. So it verifies the token. It comes back and gives the user ID. Then the user ID is going to be sent to the order service, and then the order service will make a database query based on the user ID itself. Then we get back the order data from the database. We send from order service back to order resolver. The order resolver sends it back as a response to the front end in the order store. The order store automatically sets it to the component or renders it on the component. So that's the whole flow. Now it doesn't matter if you're creating an order, if you're trying to get a particular order, or if you're trying to get a list of orders, the flow is going to be the same. So I hope this explains the whole logic of why this is more secure and this makes more sense instead of having an exposed API where anyone can use the user ID. Now that we have talked about the token itself, let's actually start implementing it. So first of all, we're going to go to the web part here and we're going to go to the auth service to implement this token function. So if I go here just before the Google sign-in, I can create a new function. I can call it async get token, and it's going to either return null or a string, which is a token. So here I can say let token, it's going to be string or null, and we're going to initialize this with null. Then we can say const user equals, and here we can say this dot auth dot current user. So we have access to the current user. Then we say if we have the user, then we say token equals await, and then we can say user dot get ID token. This is what basically gets the token from Firebase. If that's not the case, then we say else if we already have this dot ID token, which we are going to create right now, then we say token equals this dot ID token. So let's create the property here, which should be ID token, and we can assign this as an empty string, just like this. Now here we can put a quick console log here that says token from get token method. And here we can basically log it. We're going to say token here, and we are going to say return the token from this function. Good. Now that we have this function created, we need to send this token to the backend. So what we are going to do is we are going to go to the Stripe service. So here we can go to services, and here we have Stripe service.ts, and here we have this checkout session, right? So here I can go ahead and say const token, and here we can essentially get the token. So we can say this dot, and now we need to also import the auth service. So here we can say auth equals inject, and in here we can quickly go ahead and say auth service. Now in here, I could go ahead and say this.auth.get token, but since this is a promise and we are using a function which works with observables, we can essentially pipe the functions. So instead of doing this, I can essentially go ahead and say from, and this is supposed to be coming from RxJS. So make sure you import it like this. Then I'm going to put this inside here, and then I can remove this, and then I'm going to cut all of this essentially. So I'm saying from, and then I say this.auth.get token, which essentially should give us back the token here. And then I say something like pipe. And then here I say switch map. And then from here, I can essentially paste all of what I copied. So what I've said here is that I'm saying from this.auth.get token, then we essentially should receive the token here. So this should be token. And if you mouse over it, you're going to see that this is going to be either a string or null. That's what we want. Now, when we have this token right here, we essentially can go ahead and make this HTTP post with the URL. Then we have this whole object as the body, and then we can provide the headers as well. So this is going to be the headers. You're going to say object, and then inside headers, and then authorization. If you have the token, then you say bearer space token, and then empty if that's not the case. So if you don't have the token, it's going to be empty string. If you have the token, it's going to be bearer token. That's what we are saying right here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to the checkout function, or if I go here, proceed to checkout, and here we are on the checkout page. So I'm going to go and say checkout.component.ts, and I'm going to go here and just put a breakpoint here. So we don't really redirect to Stripe. Now if I hit pay with Stripe, let's see what really happens. So I'm going to do this. Then I'm going to call pay with Stripe. If I click this, you're going to see that we called the checkout API. If I go back to network, click here and go to headers. And if I scroll down, open the request headers, you can see automatically that we have this authorization that says bearer, and then this whole big thing that is exactly the token that we have from Firebase. If that was not the case, we would not have this value right here as well. So what I'm going to do is let's try this with logging out. So I'm going to quickly go ahead, play this, and then if I go back, it's going to remove the order for us. Good. Then if I say log out and try to do the same thing again, proceed to checkout, put the breakpoint in, pay with the Stripe, you can see that we came here. If I go to network, if I go to checkout API, you're going to see that at this time, if I go to request headers, we have the authorization set to empty string. So we don't really have anything here. If you're logged in, it sends the token. If you're not logged in, it doesn't send the token. Easy peasy. Now that we have the front end at least sending this request, let's talk about the backend. The backend should be able to verify this request. And for that, we essentially need a whole package that we need to install. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my server, and then I'm going to quickly go and say npm install, and here I'm going to say firebase-admin. And this is the package that we can use on the backend side to validate the token that's coming from the front end. And on this Firebase admin, you essentially have access to everything. So you need to set up the application, and then you can perform different actions as well. So now that we have the package installed, let's actually update the checkout service in the backend. If you remember the diagram, we talked about a couple of things. We talked about the order resolver, but then we also talked about this thing called Firebase service. We don't really have this set up at the moment. So what we want to do in our backend is set up this Firebase service only one single time, so we can use this across multiple modules or resolvers and essentially have this connect with Firebase. So this is going to be the thing that connects with the actual Firebase. So what we want to do is in the pet market BE, in the source app, and then if we go here, we are going to create a new folder and we are going to call this Firebase. We could also do that via the NestJS schematics as well. So let's try that actually. So cd dot dot cd dot dot. Now I'm almost at the root. So cd dot dot, and I can essentially go inside the pet market BE, and you can obviously do this easier by just right clicking it and say open in terminal. And now we have the pet market BE open. Now when we are in the folder right here, I can essentially say nx generate module, and here I can call this Firebase, and I want to run this with dry run to see what options do I get. Here you can see it essentially says schematics Angular module. That's not what I want. So what I can do is that we can generate this manually. So here I go and say app, new folder, Firebase, and inside here I'm going to say firebase.module.ts, and inside here we should have this essential code. We should have the module coming from NestJS common. We should have the module decorator providing Firebase service, exporting Firebase service, and then just defining the class here. Now let's create the Firebase service ourselves. So here we can say firebase.service.ts. Inside here we are going to essentially create an injectable which is coming from NestJS common. So make sure you have the same thing here as well, and we don't need this as well here. Now we can say export class Firebase service, and here you can say implements on module init, which essentially means that when the module is initiated, this is going to run something or have some function that implies it. So here I'm going to say on module init, just like this. Now here we only want to generate this service or initialize this once in the project. We don't want to do this multiple times. So in here we now need to import the admin as well. So I'm going to say import asterisk as admin from Firebase admin, just like this. And now I'm going to check how many apps the admin has at the moment. So I say if admin.apps length. If we don't have that, that means there's no app initiated at the moment, and then we can initiate the app here. So I'm going to say admin.initialize app, just like this, and we are going to use something called credential, and here we need to provide the credentials file as well, which we are going to import from Firebase console. But what you want to do is here you say admin.credential dot, and here you need a certificate, and in here we need something called service account, which we don't have at the moment, so we are going to add that in just a bit. Now here it says Firebase service is not there in the module file. So I'm just gonna bring this back again and it looks good. Now we are going to go back to our Firebase console and you need to go to the settings. So go to project settings, and here you are going to see that we have service accounts, and then you can go down here and you can essentially say generate new private key. This is important. Then it's going to give you this pop-up, and when you click generate key, it's going to download a file for you. For me, it downloaded in the downloads folder, but I can right click here and click reveal in file explorer. And now I can go inside the pet market BE here, and then I can paste the file. Now I'm gonna change this to call service-account.json, and you can see the file right here. Now when you open this file, you're going to see all the values right here, which is what you should have. Now another thing that you'll notice is that this also gets added to the Git, but we don't really want that. So we also need to go to git ignore here, and we also need to add this service-account.json, just like this. Now what you want to do here is to add your service account file here. So you need to say something like import, and here you can say service account from, and here you need to give the path. So since we are in the Firebase folder here, you can see that I need to go 1 up, 2 up, and then 3 up, and then we have the service account JSON file here. So you need to say .. and here you can say service-account.json. Now you'll see that we are not going to be able to import this file because we want to add something called resolve JSON module to TypeScript config. So we can do that by going to tsconfig.app.json inside pet market BE, and here you can add that in the compiler options. So resolve JSON module, set it to true, save this, and now you will see that this would be happier. Now once you have this, you can essentially come here and change this cert to say something like this. You can say service account as service account coming from Firebase admin. Once you have this, you can just save this, and now you have at least the application initiated. Now we are going to add a function to verify the token. So here I'm going to say verify token, and here this receives a token as a string. Now we're going to try to verify the token that comes from the front end. So we can say const decoded token equals await, and this is going to be async function. Now you can say admin dot auth dot, and actually not dot here but here, verify ID token, and then you pass the token here. Then you can say return decoded token dot UUID or UID, which is the user ID that we want. If we have an error here, we can essentially catch it, and we can say console dot error, and here we can say token verification failed, and then we provide the error right here. And in this case, we just return undefined. So let's save this file now. Now that we have this, we are going to restart the application. So nx run many-t serve. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to checkout, and I'm going to go to checkout module. And here we need to import the Firebase module. So here Firebase module should be imported, so we can use the Firebase service. Then we need to go inside the checkout service. And here, just like we have imported the order service, we are going to import the auth service as well. So here we can say private Firebase, and here we can say Firebase service, or you can also say Firebase service for more readability. Now when we are trying to create the order, we need to get the user ID. So here we can say let user ID, and here we can say this is going to be string or undefined by default. Then we can say if we have a token, and we don't have a token here at the moment, so we are going to say something like token is going to be string. So here we say if we have the token, then we verify it. So we say user ID equals await, and here we say this dot Firebase service dot verify token. We pass the token here, and then we essentially get back the user ID in this case. Then we also pass this user ID from the checkout service to the order service as well. So let's get the whole flow right. Right now we have worked on the checkout service. Where do we come here from? We come from the checkout controller. So this is where we should have the token. Here you can see that we are not using the create in the right manner, and I agree we need to pass the token here as well. So for now I'm gonna just say empty string. Now let's implement this correctly. We talked about the body right here, but we also talked about when we make the API call from the front end, we send the token as a header. If you remember in the Stripe service, when we send the information from the front end, we essentially add the token saying bearer, and this is what we want to send to the backend. Now when we are at the backend in the checkout service, or actually in the checkout controller, we need to get that header. So here I can say at header, or essentially at headers from NestJS common, we're going to get the authorization header, and you can keep this small. We're going to call this auth header, and this is going to be of type string. Now we are going to check if we have that header at all. So we can say const token equals, and here we can say auth header. If the auth header dot length, that means it is basically available, or we can basically say auth header. Essentially we're going to say auth header dot substring 7, and that basically means we are taking out the bearer. So you could either do that, or you can also do lowercase and then remove the bearer from it. It's either up to you. So if we have the auth header, we essentially use the substring to extract out the actual token. Otherwise we use empty string. Then we pass this token here, and that makes sense, and that's all we need, at least from the controller perspective. Now when it comes to the service perspective, we also need to enable the order service create method to accept the user ID. So let's go there. In this particular situation, you can see that we have the create order input, which has a couple of things, which has the items, which has the total amount, and which has the token. But we don't really have user ID here. And in the order service, in the create method, we want to send the user ID and not the token. So I actually cannot use this create order input. We are going to have to create something else for this. So I'm going to go to the file where this is created, and this is in the orders DTO create order input. I'm actually going to create a new interface here called create order service DTO, and that has the items, which has the order item input, then it has the total amount and the user ID. And we're going to use this in the service. So we're going to go back to order service, and in here, instead of this, I'm going to say create order service DTO. This is important. I'm going to save this file as well. And in here, in the order service now, I am able to extract out the user ID. So I can say user ID just like this. And that means essentially when we are creating the order, I can say total amount, items, but then also the user ID as well. So here we can pass the user ID. If the user ID exists, then it exists, and we add a new order, and then essentially, yeah, we can see that. Otherwise, we will have an order created still, but without a user ID. So let's try to do something. I'm going to go to my database here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and delete all the orders that we have done so far. So we can start fresh and see everything working. So I'm going to delete these records. And that means also that we would have no order items left as well. So quickly, let's delete this one as well. And now I can go to order item. And if I remove the filters, essentially, you can see we have nothing here. Now let's try creating an order when we are not really logged in. So if I hit pay with Stripe now, you're going to see that if I go to Neon console here, go to order, you can see we have this order created. We don't have a user ID here, right? If I go to order items, I have the order items here. Good. Now, if I hit play and go back, you're going to see that this order would be deleted because we have implemented the logic now. So if I go here, go to order item, no order items here, no orders here. Nice. Now I'm going to try doing the same thing with logging in. So if I go and log in with Google, and now if I go and try to proceed to checkout, pay with Stripe, now you can see that we got the token and then we essentially went to Stripe. Now if I go to Neon here and try to reload the data, you can see that we still don't have the user ID. So something is wrong. Did we save all the files? I think we did. But I'm going to quickly put the console logs as well, just to make sure that I see everything working. So I'm going to go to checkout controller here. We're going to say console log. We're going to say token. And then in the service, I'm also going to look into the user ID. So here I'm going to say token and user ID, so to say, and let's save this. Now let's try this once again. I'm going to click back here. So the order gets deleted. Now I'm going to go again, pay with Stripe. And if I go back here, you can see that here we should have the token here. So we do have the token here, but apart from the token, I don't really see the user ID. So here, let's see. When we come to checkout service, it comes here. So the controller here gets the token and then it says checkout service.create and sends the token in here. Okay. So it goes here, but then it doesn't really come here, which doesn't make sense. So it could be that the files are not refreshed at all and I may need to restart my server. But let's try this again. Now if I click pay with Stripe and come back here, now I can see the data here. I think it was just some issue with the refreshing of the server, but you can see that here we have the token and then here we have the token and the user ID. And now if I go to Neon, you can see that we have the user ID here. Hey, so we have the user ID when we create the order based on authentication, starting from the front end, sending the token to the backend and the backend validating from Firebase and then adding the user ID by itself. This is amazing. Now, of course, if I go to Stripe, go back, this order should still be deleted. So if I refresh now, it gets deleted with the user ID. Only makes sense. Now that we have this implemented, I want to go and implement the orders page or the orders link as well. So let's quickly go to the application here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go into the front end. So pet market web here, and inside the app, I'm going to open into terminal. And here I'm going to create a component. So here I can say NXG component, and here I can say orders/orders. I essentially can see the folder, but not the orders component. So here I'm just going to say this, and it's going to be NX Angular component. And now here you can see the orders component HTML. I'm also going to create another one, but without the S. So it's going to be order/order. And this one is supposed to be the detail page. So I'm going to add that as well. Now, since we have two different folders here, and this is a component, the order detail component, I actually want to move this inside components, which is outside. So I'm going to do this. Do it so you can see the order detail right here. Now some of the things may not work as expected, but we are going to fix that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this components folder from orders, and let's have a look at orders components. So I'm going to remove this as well, order with items, and let's import this again. Good. So this should be okay. If we look at the checkout success component, that doesn't really work because we have moved the component. So let's remove this. I'm going to import this again, and this should be fine as well. Good. So you basically go and update the things that need to be updated, and that should make things good. All right, now that we have the orders page created, at least we can implement the HTML. So we're going to go back to pet market assets repository, and in here you will see that we have the orders page. So here you can go ahead and say orders.component HTML, copy all of this, and then you go to our project, and in here you need to go to orders component HTML and paste it just like this. Now you'll notice that we have order store.loading, order store.error, all of these things. So we are going to implement that, of course. So we are going to go to the TypeScript file here, and we are going to add the orders store here. So we can say order store equals inject, and here we can say order store. Now we need a function in the order store. So here we have get order, which essentially gets one single order by ID. Okay. We have update order, remove unpaid order. Now we need get user orders. So we are going to create it just above update order. So we can say get user orders, and then we can make this an RX method as well, but I want to not make it an RX method. I will make the RX method in the component itself. So that gets destroyed when the component gets destroyed. So here I'm going to keep this a simple method. Here we're going to say return from, and from we are going to say the auth service. So here we need the auth service injected. Right now you can see we only have Apollo injected here, but we can also inject the auth service here. So we can say auth equals inject, and this is the front end auth service. Just bear this in mind. Now we can say from auth.get token, we are going to pipe it. We're going to use switch map here, and we are going to say here that we get the token. So this token is going to be either string or null. Now in here we can say if we don't have the token, then what do we do? So if we don't have the token, then we can't really get the user's orders at all. So we're going to say throw new error, and here we can say user not authenticated at all. And this is on the front end. Now we can also say console.log here, and we can say token in order store for get user orders, and here we can log the token itself. This means that we have the token here. Now we can say here return apollo.query, and this is going to send us back the user orders. We have not implemented it yet, but let's say we say user orders, which is going to be order with items and an array of it essentially. Now we can provide the query itself. So the query is going to be something that we are going to create, and then the variables are going to be essentially the token. So here we say token itself. Okay, now let's create the query here. The query can be created right here. So just after delete unpaid order, here we can say const get user orders equals GQL, and in here I can say this. So look at the query here. We are saying get user orders. This is our name that we have given. It's going to have a token of type string. It's gonna be there always, and then we call user orders. This is sort of the query that we need to create on the backend, but it will get us back the ID, total amount, status, items. Okay, and this is going to be multiple of them, of course. So now we can quickly go ahead here, and then we can say get user orders. So we are going to use this. Now once we have this done, we can essentially do a tap, and in here we're going to update the state here, of course. So we can say here we have the result, and here we're going to say patch state. We got the store here, and then we say orders are going to be result.data.user orders. We're going to say the loading is going to be false. We don't have a loading here. Okay, I'm going to add that, and then we have the error set to null. Now the loading can be added here, so we can say loading is going to be false here, and we also should have loading, and we can say this is going to be Boolean. That also means that when we talk about this patch state, we are going to set it also before we start the Apollo query. So here we can say patch state store, and here we can say loading is going to be true. Finally, we are also going to handle errors. So we can say catch error here, and we can import this from RxJS. In case of error, we set the error message to error, and here we should also have loading set to false, and we should rather say error.message here. Now that we have this done, instead of actually implementing in the component, let's actually implement this in the backend. So we're going to go to the backend folder here, and in the source app orders, and then we have the orders resolver here. We need a function to get the user's orders. So in here, we're going to add a new query. So we are going to say add query, and this is going to be similar to what we have right here. So we're going to copy this. We are going to call this user orders, just like we have defined that in the store or the GQL. Then we're going to say async find user orders, and in here, then we are going to say the arguments is going to have the token. So we're going to call it token. We're going to give it the type as well. So the type is going to be a function that returns back a string. Essentially, we are calling this that it has to have a token, and then we call it token, and then we say this is going to be of type string. Now inside here, we're going to say console.log. We can say token in backend, which is important, and then we say token. So we are going to log this at least to see if the token comes to the backend. Then we can say const user ID equals await this dot auth, and we don't have auth here at the moment. So first of all, the orders module should have the Firebase module imported. That's the first. Then we can have the Firebase service here as well. So we can say private read only Firebase service, just like this. Now we can say instead of auth Firebase service dot verify token, and we send the token in. Then we say if we have the user ID, or to say if we don't have the user ID, then we can say throw new unauthorized exception. We get it from NestJS common, and here we can say user, or we can say rather invalid or expired token, just to have a different error message. Then we say console.log. Essentially, we can copy this thing, and we can say user ID in backend user orders, and then we console log this guy, and then we say return this dot order service dot find, and we don't want to use find all. We want to have another function for this. So we're gonna go to the service itself, order service, and in here we have create, we have find all. We can essentially create a find by user something. descending. So here we call it find user orders, but instead of find all here, I can essentially copy this and say find by or find user orders, something like this. And here we're going to still use find many, but here we're going to also use the where, and in here we need to pass the user ID, which is going to be a string, right? So you can also just say call it ID, call it user ID actually. So here it should be where user ID matches the user ID, but also we want only the orders to be shown which are not payment required. So here we can say not, and then here we can say payment required. So anything that's pending, delivered, or started delivery, that's going to be shown. Finally, we do have the include here, but I also want to order this as well. So order by, and here we can say created at, and here we can say descending. So the latest order should be at the top. Now that we have this function here, I'm going to save this. I'm going to go to order resolvers, and here I can use find user orders, and I can pass the user ID just like this. Awesome. So I'm going to save this now, and hopefully everything should work fine when we go to the orders component. So let's go to the pet market web, source, app, and orders component HTML here. Okay. So now in the orders component TS file, we also need to import the router link. So the link at least works fine. So this is happy now. Now what I want to do is I want to get the user's order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function here. I'm going to call it get orders equals, and I'm going to create an RX method here. This is going to be void by default. And in here, I want to do a pipe with a switch map that says this dot order store dot get user orders, right? And then all I want to do here is to use ng on init, and in here I want to say this dot get orders. That's pretty much it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm also going to say implements on init and then save this. Now that we have this done, let's actually go in the routes to add this order page. So I'm going to go here and add another route. We're going to say the path is going to be orders load component. In here we're going to say import, we're going to say orders / orders component, and then dot then, and here we can say c dot orders component. So now we have the orders route at least created. Now what you can do is you can go to the header component. So components header component in HTML, and if you scroll up here, you should be able to have an li here. So let's quickly add an li, and in here I want to have this a tag. So I'm going to quickly copy this, put the a tag here, and then call this orders, and then we say orders. And we don't really want this class hover underline, so let's make it simple. Now if I go to my application and if I try to click this drop down, I don't really see that. So if I refresh now, do we have that drop down? No. And is that because I put it in the wrong place? I don't think so. Let's quickly save this. And if I scroll down, I should be able to find the logout button, which is right here. And this is shown when we have the drop down open. So I can essentially go here and add an li here as well. Now you can see that this doesn't look good at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the styles. So copy the style here, paste it like this, copy the role menu item, also paste it like this, and then also the click here as well. So I'm going to put the click here as well. And let's quickly save this. What does this say now? Click must be accompanied by either key up or for accessibility. Aha, okay. I think we may have to change this into a button essentially. So let's quickly do that. And we're not going to have logout here. So let's remove that, which means that I don't really need this as a button, to be honest. So I could just say li and remove the click. Now you can see that this looks nice. So if I go here, click orders, let's see what happens. Nothing happens at the moment. It actually goes to the orders page and it says bad request. Good. Now I wonder why this was a bad request. I'm going to restart the server just to ensure that everything works as it should. All right. So if I refresh the application now, I see something different. It says user not authenticated, which means that I'm not authenticated here for some weird reason. So let's try to go to order store and see what's happening. So order store. And if I go here, let's quickly go to get user orders. So I'm going to quickly come here and then check this as well. So if I refresh now, it comes here in the order stores.get. And then if I go there, it says token is not there as well. So it tries to get the token, but it doesn't really have that token at all. So then I'm going to go to auth service here and let's have a look at the get token method. So if I refresh now, hit play, come here, and you can see that at this particular moment, we don't even have the user set up. So you don't see my logged in state here. Now it says user is null. It comes here and then it proceeds from there, says there's no token, and it doesn't really work as expected. Ideally, what should happen in this particular case is that instead of getting the token from here, which essentially returns null at the moment, we should be looking at the user's authenticated object. And once we have authentication done, then we go ahead, get the token, and then do rest of the stuff. So instead of relying on this, we essentially can do something like auth.current user, and we are going to pipe on top of this. Then we are going to go ahead and here we are going to say filter, and we are only going to work when we actually have the user. And this filter should come from RxJS, so import it nicely. And then you can going to say here that we should get the user and we will only go ahead when we have the user available. So this is really important to put it like this. Now we're not going to keep a constant subscription here. So we need to take one out of it. So we can say take one, and this also needs to be imported from RxJS. So you need to import all of these things from RxJS just like this, as you see here. Now what this means is that we are going to first look at the user. We are going to wait until the user is available, and then we are going to take just one value out of it, which means we are going to take the user, and then we are going to use a switch map here. So we are going to say switch map here, and then we are going to say from, as we did before, and here we can say user dot get ID token, and we are going to take the user from here. So user, and we are going to say user dot get ID token just like this. And when we do this, then we should have the token available here now. Now in case we don't have the token, which should not be the case, we are just going to throw the error that says user not authenticated just like this, and we are going to move the patch state from here actually to the top. So as soon as the get user orders is triggered, we start with the loading state, then we wait for the user to be available, then we go ahead and get the ID token. Once we have the token, then we proceed ahead. And one more thing that you could do here is that you can essentially put here the network or policy here, which is the fetch policy, and here you can say network only to always get the fresh data. Now if you don't really put it, it's going to use the cached version as far as I believe. So I'm going to put it just like this, and let's see if this works now. So I'm going to open my terminal here, and now if I refresh my application, you can see that we got the loader, and then now we are able to get the data. So this is exactly what we wanted. Now we're going to put some breakpoints. So here, let's go to order store here, and I'm going to go and put the breakpoint in get user orders just like this. Then we're going to go here and put a breakpoint here in the get ID token, and we quickly close this, and let's quickly put a breakpoint here. Now I'm going to put a breakpoint here as well. I don't know why this keeps coming up. Let's put a breakpoint here as well. All right, now let's refresh and see what happens. So first it comes here and it would set the loading to true. Then it waits and takes the first value that comes out of this whole process, which means that now we should have the user. So if I mouse over the user here or hit play, you can see that the user is available here, and we can call the get ID token from here to essentially get the value. So if I go ahead, you see the token is available here. If the token was not here, then we would see the error, but since it's here, we don't really need to worry about it. Then it goes ahead here and proceeds from here. And now that we have this, the whole process should be fine. Now it gets the result, which is having the orders, as you can see right here. If I hit play, we can see the orders here. Nice. Now we are going to go and implement the order detail page as well. So when we click this particular page, it should go to the order detail page. And for that, we already created a component. So what I want you to do is to go to order component here. And if you open this, you're going to see that it has an empty HTML and a TypeScript file here as well, but it doesn't have a route set up yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to app.routes.ts here, and I'm just going to copy this and paste it here. And this should be orders slash, and here we can say ID just like this. And then here we are going to say order component. Here it should be order, and this should be order component just like this. Now let's quickly save this now. And now if I go to my browser, I can click back here, and here we're going to get the orders just like this. If I click this one, it goes to the order detail page with the ID. So the URL is actually correct, but we don't really show the order at the moment. So what I want you to do is to go to pet market assets repository now and go to the order folder inside pet market web source app, and inside here order, and now just copy this whole thing from here. Then we go back to our project and we go to the order.component.html and paste it just like this. Now you're going to see that we have some things missing. We don't have the order store here, and we don't have the app order detail here. So we're going to go ahead into the order component TS, and here we are going to first import order detail component. Then we are also going to add the order store. So order store equals inject, and here we say order store just like this. And now we can save the HTML here as well. Now if I go to my page, you can see that this just renders something, but we don't really have any details here at all. So what's missing here? We don't really have the API call to get the order in this case. So what we should do here is that we should go ahead and here say implements on init just like this. And here we can say ng on init. Now I can go here and say this dot order store dot, and here I can essentially call the get order method, which is going to return us an observable. So what I can do here is that I can essentially create an Rx method here as well, just for the sake of having the ID as the URL parameter here. So I can say here get order is going to be an Rx method, and this is going to have a string as a URL here. Then what we are going to do here is that we are going to run pipe here, and then we can just run a quick switch map here just like this. Once we have this, we are going to return this dot order store dot get order, and we need to pass the ID or the order ID here. So we can say order ID, and here we can pass the order ID just like this, right? Now what we can do is we can provide this order ID, which we should be getting from the URL. So what we are going to do is we are going to import the activated route. So we can say route equals and inject, and here we can say activated route just like this. Then in the ng-on-init, we are going to extract out the URL parameter. So we can say const order ID equals, and here we can say this dot route dot snapshot dot params, and in here you can say ID just like this, or we could also say param map dot get. And here we can say ID to be consistent. And now we are going to double check if we don't really have an order ID, then we just set the error to say no order ID found. This should actually never be the case because it only comes to this route when we have the ID available. But just for the sake of safety, we are putting it here. Now that we have this, we can essentially pass the order ID from here and we should be good to go. And we should have an order to render. So I'm going to save this now. And I'm also going to save the HTML file. Now, if I go back to my browser and refresh, you're going to see that this probably would not work. And let's see why that's the case. If I go to the order.component.ts and go here on the ng-on-init, let's see what happens. So I'm going to refresh now and it comes here. It extracts the order ID just like this. So we have the order ID, then it goes here and then it tries to go to the get order. Now we're trying to do get order here. Instead, we should have just called this rx method. So I'm going to go back to my order component here, and instead of using this, we're just going to call the get order method, which is the rx method here. Now let's quickly refresh now and let's see if this works. So as you can see already, when we refresh, we automatically can see the order ID right here, and then we can get the order here. Now this particular route does not have to be authenticated in the sense that if the user has a specific order ID, this could be a guest order. This could also be an order of a particular user. So we need to ensure that when we are trying to get a particular order, is it a guest order or is it a particular user's order? If it's a particular user's order, then we need to ensure that that is of the user who's trying to access this order. But even in that case, we don't really want to restrict this particular route. So I'm going to leave it just like this. If someone has the ID of the order, I think they should be able to just see it. So we're going to leave it just like this. Now, finally, I'm also going to go back to the header component, and I just noticed that we have an issue here, and that is that we don't really have this link filling the whole complete li, which is a problem. So what I need to do here is I'm going to say class, and here I can say width full and height full as well. I'm going to save this. Now, if I open this, you can see that still this is not a link. If I mouse over here, then I can click and go to order. So if I click here, nothing really happens. If I click here, it works. And that is because anchor tag by default is not blocked. So we're going to call it block here. And now if I go here and mouse over, you can see that the cursor changes as well, just like this. And if I click here now, we essentially go to the orders page. Now, what we need to also do is to toggle the drop down if we click here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the parent of this button and this li, which is this div, and I'm going to add a click handler here. So let's say click, and in here I can say toggle drop down just like this. In this case, you can see that all of this becomes red because of this ESLint rule that says that we should have this click handler having a key up, key down, or key press as well, which means that this should be accessible in this particular scenario. But since we only want to propagate here that we want to toggle the drop down, we could also go ahead and here we can maybe put it just like this. But then we also have to treat this as a button as well. So let's quickly go ahead and say button as well. So let's save this now. And what I'm going to do here is that the logout should also toggle the drop down. But let's deal with the orders first. If I click the orders button, you can see that it hides the drop down, which is what we want. When I click logout, it also basically does the same thing. So it removes it by default, because if I go to the logout method, I can see that the drop down is set to false here, which essentially makes things work. And now if we try to see, we can essentially see the orders here. What if I refresh now? If I refresh now, I should not be able to get the orders of this particular user because we are not really logged in. So you can see that we keep a constant loading right here in this particular situation, which is the drawback of the approach that we have used. But we are going to improve this with a different approach. But in here, it's just waiting for the user to be authenticated. And if not, it's just gonna keep doing it over and over. But what about the order detail page? If I go there and refresh, you can see that immediately we can get the response from the backend. Super cool. And the fun part of this is that if I right click this and go to view page stores, you're gonna see that in here also, we're going to have the data as well. So order details is here, order ID is here. You can also see the items, the price as well. All of this can be seen right here because this is rendered from the server side. On the server, it looks at the URL itself and then renders the component accordingly, which is super nice. All right, now that we have looked into this, I want to address a couple of things. First, we can't really go to the orders page if we are not logged in, and we should be able to stop the user from going there. However, we can't really do that if the user is not logged in by default, if we don't really store that in local storage or somewhere else, that we can essentially use on the backend side as well as on the front end side as well. And the second thing also is that we can't really do this on the server side as well. So if I try to be logged in, for example, so let's try to log in via Google, and now I'm going to go to my orders page, and now I'm going to try to do view page source. And if I go here and do a line wrap, you're going to see that this will not return us the list of orders here. For example, here you can see we have order number or status here. If I try to do status here, you're going to see that we can't really find any instances of status in the whole page. And that is because the server side doesn't have authentication at all. The only place where Firebase works is the front end, or is the client side rendering of what is happening in the browser, and not on the server side rendering. And that is a bit troublesome, because here you can see the token in order store is essentially this one, but you can see that we don't really see the same log here. So we don't really see the token in order store for get user orders on the server log, which means that when we are running SSR, we don't really see the same log here. So this is only working on the client side and not on the server side. And in our application, we're trying to get everything from the server side. So even the orders should be rendered from the server side. Now, in order to implement that, as I mentioned, we are going to use something called cookies. So we are going to essentially install a package. And for that, you can quickly go and say npm install JS cookie. And then we are also going to install the types for this particular package. So here I can quickly say npm install --save-dev, and here types /js cookie. Now that this is done, we are going to implement the Firebase configuration or initialization on the server side rendering as well. And we are also going to use JavaScript cookies to essentially store the ID token in the cookies essentially. So first of all, let's implement the cookies part here. So I'm going to close all my files here, and I'm going to open auth.service.ts, and this should be in the pet market web, as you can see here. And we're going to go ahead and at the top, we are going to import at least the package. So we are going to say import cookies from JS cookie. Then we are going to go down here and we can create a function here called handle cookies, or handle cookie, so to say, since we are only setting one cookie here. And we're going to say if we have the token here or not. So we could have a token of type string here. If we get the token here, then we want to say cookies dot set. And here we're going to give the key. So it's going to be __ pet market or PM _ session. And then we are going to provide the value of the token right here. You can call this PM session or PM token. It doesn't really matter, but you can use it just like this. If that's not the case, then we just say cookies dot remove, and then we use the same ID. So what I can do is I can essentially take this out from here, and I can say cookie key just to not use it hard coded all the time. And here I can say this dot cookie key. That sounds funny. This dot cookie key. Now, if I go down here, you can see that when we do get token, we essentially create a local variable, and then we try to get the user's ID token from this function, or we use this ID token here. Now, we have not set the value of this variable ever in our code so far. For example, if I do equals, you can see that this was never set. We only are retrieving the value here, but using the cookies, we are going to essentially set the value of this token as well. So now what we need to do is we're going to go and create a constructor function here, and we need to decide if we are on the front end, or let's say on the client side, or on the server side. So this is again front end Angular application, but on the client side versus server side, and we need setup for both situations. So what we are going to do here is that we are going to first have the platform ID. So we can say platform ID equals inject here, and then we can say platform ID just like this. Then we can say if is platform server, and here we can say this dot platform ID just like this. Then we set up server auth. Otherwise, we say set up browser auth. Now let's first implement the browser authentication. So here we can say set up browser auth, and we are going to call this function right here. So this dot setup browser auth. And in this one, what we need to work with is a function that is given by Firebase automatically, which gives us the ID token. So here we can call on ID token changed, and you can see that as I type it, I can see that it comes from Angular Fire auth. So we need to call this function, and this requires two things. One, this requires the auth, and second, it requires a function to be called essentially when the value changes. So here I can say this dot auth to provide the auth instance, and then here we can provide an async function which is going to receive the user whenever the token changes. So just like this. Now I can try getting the token. So I can say const token equals await user dot, and here I can say ID token or get ID token just like this, and then I can say this dot handle cookie, and I can pass the token from here, of course. So I'm gonna just do like this. Okay, now this function essentially should also be unsigned unsubscribed as well. And you can see that this returns the unsubscribe function. So we need to assign it somewhere. So we're going to go up and we are going to create a property here called unsubscribe from onID token changed. And this is going to be of a type of a function that essentially returns void, or this is going to be undefined by default. Now we're going to take this variable and we are going to assign this value. So this dot and the value here, and we are assigning it to this whole function, as you can see. And that means that we are also going to go here and say implements, and here we can say on destroy. So we can go ahead at the end and we are going to create ng on destroy just like this. And here we can say this dot unsubscribe from onID token changed dot, or actually call it like this. And especially if the function exists. So that means that if the value of this is existing, then it's going to just unsubscribe from it. Now that we have handled the token, we also want to handle another thing here in the browser authentication. And that is if the authentication itself changes. So if the ID token doesn't change, but let's say the user logs in or logs out, then what really happens? So we do have a function that says before auth state change, and we can essentially subscribe to here as well in the same manner. So here I can say this dot auth as the first argument, and then we have the same thing here. So async, a function that gets a user just like this. And now we need to check the cookie, or essentially to set the cookie accordingly. Now when you see the signature of this function, you're going to see a couple of things. One, as the second argument, we provide the callback where we get the user when it's updated. And then also we have this on abort as well. If you look at on abort, this is triggered if another auth state change callback throws or has an error, and then we should be able to handle the side effects. So what we do here is that we maintain the cookie in a temporary variable. We try to get the cookie from this new authentication state change or this callback. But if there was an abort happening, then we revert back the value. So let's put it like this. We first create a variable called prior cookie value. This is, let's say, step 1. Then we go ahead here and we say prior cookie value. Essentially, we save the existing value that is about to be changed. So instead of using the ID token variable, which we have created right here, we are essentially going ahead and putting the prior cookie value right here. So in here, we first say cookies dot get, and then we say this dot cookie key. So we essentially get the value of the cookies and we save it here for temporary reasons. So here you can say this is going to be step 2. Then we say const token, and then we try to do await, and then we do the exact same thing here. So we essentially get the user's ID token, and then we do exactly the same thing. So we go ahead and say this dot handle cookie, passing the token in. Now let's say there's an abort that happened. So on abort was basically called, which means that this is going to be an async function just like the other one, and I'm going to use this as an arrow function. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this dot handle cookie, and then I'm going to pass the prior cookie value. So what I'm trying to say here is that once we have a change in the auth state, before we assign the new value to the cookie, we get the existing value of the cookie and save it in the temporary variable. So forget what I said about the ID token. That's a different thing. We're talking about the cookie here. So when we have the new cookie about to be set, we essentially save the previous one temporarily. So step 2, save temporarily. Then we essentially save the new value. So you can call this step 3. So this sets the new value of the cookie in the cookies essentially. But let's say there was an abort happening. In that case, we revert back to the existing cookie or the previous cookie that we had saved. So this is really important. And this is essentially step 4 that you can say roll back. Finally, once we have done all of this in the setup, so we have set a handler for this guy and this guy, then we go ahead and essentially get the value from the cookie and set it to ID token. So here I say this dot ID token equals, and then I say cookies dot get, and here I say this dot cookie key. So we essentially get the cookie's existing value and assign it to ID token. Now we are either going to get that value or not. So I'm going to say or assign an empty string right here. Now, as we did the unsubscription here for this particular handler on ID token change, we also need to do the same thing for this auth state change as well. For this one, we are going to go above here and we are going to create a variable here, unsubscribe from before auth state change. And this is going to have the same signature as this one. I'm going to copy this, go here and assign the value here. So this dot, this variable equals, and now I'm going to go to the ng on destroy. And here I'm going to say this dot and then dot, and then calling the function just like this. Now we have the whole setup done actually. Now what does this mean? Now I'm going to restart my server. So quickly, let's try to start the server, and it seems like my server crashed. So let's quickly do nx run many-t serve. Now, if I try to go to my browser and just refresh here, let's see what happens. You're going to see that if I hit play here, just remove the breakpoints, and now I'm logged in. If I go to my applications tab here in the debugger, and if I go to cookies, you're going to see that localhost 4200 has a cookie already set now that says PM session. And this has the token that we get from Firebase. Super cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clear everything. So let's go to storage and clear site data. Now, if I refresh now, you're going to see that we don't have have the user logged in anymore. That's the first thing. And then you can see that we keep loading and loading and loading. Now let's debug the whole process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to auth service and we're going to put some breakpoints here. So I'm going to click here, click inside here as well whenever the ID token changes. And then when we have the auth state change as well and the abort here as well. And I'm going to put a breakpoint here as well. Now when we refresh, let's see what happens. In this case, it goes to set a browser auth because this is not platform server. So it goes inside here and then it registers this function and it should also register this function as well. So comes here as well, and then comes to this particular line. It would try to get the cookies but will not find anything. So this should be empty string by default, as you can see. Now if I hit play, this is going to look at the user's state. So here you can see that whenever the ID token changes, it comes here with the user. Now this one is null. So this is not going to have any token, and you can see that this will not save anything at all. Now you can see that we have a constant loader going on and nothing has changed now. Now if I try to go to login and do continue with Google, and when the login is successful, you can see that it comes here and now it tries to look at the cookie. So there will not be any prior cookie value because we were not logged in. Then it goes here, gets the token, as you can see right here, and then goes into the handle cookie, then gets the token, and now it is about to set the cookie. If I go to application right now and see the cookies here, you can see a bunch of cookies here, but not the PM session. Now if I hit and play this, you're going to see that in the application, we have the PM session cookie here, which shows the value of this token. Awesome. And now it also triggered the ID token change because obviously we have signed in now. So the token is going to be changed. And now if I come here, it essentially sets the cookies. This is amazing. Now, when I refresh the application, let's see what happens. So it comes into the setup browser auth, right? Now it's going to register for both of these things. But this time, when it tries to set the ID token in the beginning, as soon as the application refreshes, it's going to be able to get the cookie and it's going to be able to set the ID token, which means that now when I go to the orders page, I should be able to quickly get the orders. I don't even have to wait for the user to be authenticated or to look if the Firebase authentication is ready because I already instantly have the ID token available. So I don't even need to do all the magic that we did before, which means that if I wanted to go to order store, I'm going to say order.store.ts. And when we say get users orders, which means that I can essentially get rid of all of this and keep just this one. So I'm going to actually cut this from here and then let's quickly paste it here. So it's going to be from, and then I can remove these lines from here as well. Now, instead of using user.getID token, I can say this dot, and here we had Firebase service. I'm not really sure if we have that here. So we do have the auth service here, sorry, which means that this can be auth dot, and here we can say get token, just like this, which returns a promise. So this should work out of the box now. Now you can see that we have some errors here of the unused RxJS operator. So we can remove the filter and whatever we are not really using. So filter and take can essentially go away. And now if I save this, the build should be fine. And now if I refresh this now, let's see what happens. So now if I try to go to the orders page, you're going to see that instantly we get the data. Even we don't really have to wait quite a long time for the token. If I refresh now, you can see that by default, it says user not authenticated because that's happening from the backend, and the front end essentially just gets the data. Now, this also means one thing, that we don't really set the error away. So if I go back to my code here and go to order store and go to the user's orders here, you will see that we start with patch state loading true. In this case, the error should be null by default when we start making this particular call. When we get back the data, we should also set the error to null as well. And let's save this quickly. And now we have a situation where it says user not authenticated, and that is essentially coming from the backend. So we are rendering something that comes from the backend, and then we have the client side working with that. If I go to the Angular extension here, let's see what it says. And here you can see that the app orders is hydrated on the front end, which means that it then should send the API call as well. Now, when we go to the orders component HTML here, let's see what this says to us. And here you can see that if we have the situation where we have the order store.error, it should render the error. Otherwise, it's going to render the orders for us. Now, in this particular situation where we have some content being shown from the server side rendering, some from the client side rendering, it's not really justifying because the state is different between these two things. So now we also need to handle the token on the server side as well for the same use case. Or we can go here and say, make this call only on the client side rendering. So here you could essentially go ahead and say if is platform browser, and here you can say inject, and here you can say platform ID. Then you can go ahead and basically call this get orders, which means that now this is not going to run this on the server side rendering. And now this doesn't like it because I'm using inject here, which doesn't work outside of constructor. So here I can say platform ID equals and inject just like this. And here I can say this dot platform ID, and let's save this. Now, if I go to my browser, you're going to see that here it says no order found. So it doesn't run it on the backend, but then here it still shows, or when it hydrates, it shows that information. I don't really like it because we have two different states in the server and then in the client. Nope. So what I should be doing is that instead of working around these things, make the state similar for the backend and the client side as well. Or I could go ahead and say this route would only work on the client side. The correct way to handle this on the client side would actually be to go and set up the right routing for the server. So if I go here to app.routes.server.ts, you'll see that all of our routes are essentially set up to be rendered on the server side. I could essentially go here and create a route for orders, and I'm going to say here the path is going to be orders, and here I'm going to say the render mode is going to be render mode dot client instead of server, and this needs to be before the wildcard here, so this gets registered first and then works as expected. Now if I go here and refresh, you can see that this particular route doesn't get rendered from the backend at all, and you can see that it only gets rendered on the client side. If that's your requirement, well, that's what you gotta do. You essentially put the client side rendering on the server routes configuration. But I don't really want that. I want the server side in this particular situation as well, and I want to show you how to configure the Firebase authentication on the backend. And trust me, I think you will not find this easily explained anywhere on YouTube or even on the internet as well. So let's take a step back. Right now, whenever we are logged in, we essentially have the cookie set of PM session. When we try to log out and refresh here, you're going to see that this cookie is gone. So this is working as expected. However, we want to also probably allow this particular route only when the user is logged in. But before going there, let's actually set up the server route correctly. So first of all, I'm going to remove these logs that we have, so we don't have a lot of logs that we don't really want to see. So I'm going to quickly go here, remove this particular log, remove this token in the backend as well. And now let's go back to the auth service, and now we are going to set up the platform server auth as well. So here we're going to say this dot setup or set up server auth like this, and we need to create this function now. So on the server side, we need a couple of things. First of all, we need access to the request, and by that I mean whenever you try to put a URL here, this essentially goes towards the server side rendering first as a request, which has a header, which has a URL as well, and it goes through this process that you will see here in our code base in the main.server.ts, not here, essentially in the server.ts maybe. So in here, you can see that we are using this Angular SSR node, and we are using something called Angular Node App Engine. If you scroll a bit down, you're going to see that we have this particular route. So whatever comes into our Angular SSR, this goes through this Angular app and it passes the requests to this Angular app to handle it essentially. And then when it has a response, it basically passes it or it just uses the next. But regardless, this is where it essentially goes. So it is a request, and the request has headers and whatnot. So we need to access this particular request in order to work with that. And the way we can do it is by using const request equals inject, and here we are going to call request from Angular core. Once you have this imported, we are going to essentially get the headers. So we can say const request headers equals request dot, and here you can get headers. Then we are going to quickly console log the request headers so we can see those as well. Now you can see that for every request, we essentially get all these headers. So right now, when we saved this, we essentially were at localhost 4200. We get all these headers like accept, we have the user agent here as well. All of the things can be seen here. And in this particular moment, we are not even logged in. So let's try with logging in and see if there is a change in the headers now. Now that I'm logged in, let's try it out. If I go back to my logs here on the server side of Angular, you can see that still we don't really see the cookies because we need to set up some things. So now that we have set this up, we are going to quickly go ahead and say const cookie header, and we are going to extract out the cookie header from here as well. In here, we want to say request headers dot, and here I'm going to say get, and here I'm going to say cookie. Now we are going to create a variable for the auth ID token. So we can say let auth ID token, that's going to be a string or undefined by default. And then we can say if we have the cookie header, then we are going to essentially take out the pairs because there can be multiple cookies. So we can say const cookie pairs equals, and here I can say cookie pair or actually cookie header dot split, and we're going to split it by semicolon because that's what cookies usually use. And then we can say for const pair of cookie pairs, we can extract out the key and value like this. So key value, and here we can say pair dot trim dot split, and we basically split by equals. So you will essentially see the cookies usually just like this. So you have something like PM session equals 1 2 3 4, then you would have something like UID blah blah blah, and then just like this. So you can essentially first split by this. So you have this whole value and this whole value, and then you go ahead and split with equals. So you get the key and value separately and the key and the value separately, just like like this. Then we say if the key is this dot cookie key, then we say auth ID token is essentially found and is going to be set. So here we are going to say value, and then we just break from here. Now, after trying to find the cookie header, if we actually found auth ID token, then I want to set it essentially. So I'm going to say this dot ID token equals auth ID token, just like this. Then I can say console.log here, and I can say cookie set on the server. This is the log that we are essentially looking for. And this is when we see this, we're going to be like, okay, we are done. And then I can say this dot ID token, just like this. And then once we have the token here as well, from the request, we also need to set it in the cookies as well. So here we can say this dot handle cookie, and we essentially pass this dot ID token. If that's not the case, if we don't have the auth ID token, then we just call this dot handle cookie. And that means that we are going to remove the cookie if it existed before. Good. So we're going to save this now, and we are going to ensure that this is being called right here, which it is. Good. So now here, when you see the cookies here, you can see the request headers now had this cookie, which had PM session equals all of this. And then if I scroll down here, you can see that we got this log cookie set on the server, and then we have the token. Hey! So now that we have gotten the cookie on the server, we can actually see that the orders might be working already. Now, if I try to go to my orders page, you can see that we see this here. And now if I try to clean this, refresh now, you can see that that was pretty instant, but does it come from the server? Let's try it out. I'm going to right click here, go to view page source. And now if I say your orders, you can essentially see the orders text right here. You can also see the order coming from the backend now with the status, which is shown right here, and with the price as well. So all of this is now actually being rendered on the server just by setting the cookies. How cool is that? But what happens if I try to log out now? If I log out now, the cookie on the server, would it still be set? If I refresh now, you're going to see that we may not be sending this cookie anymore. So if I go here, you can see that we called the get orders. Or if I refresh now, you can see if I go to the headers, we don't really send any cookies at all. If I log in now, continue with Google, and now go to orders, you can see that the last call that we sent here with get user orders, we essentially send the token in our first call. If I try to refresh the page, you're going to see that we immediately see the orders, then we see a loader, and then essentially the orders come back again. And if I see the server logs as well, you can see now we have the same log as we have on the front end. So we do have the ID token set for get user orders, which essentially allows us to get the users first on the back end, comes on the front end, and then hydrates from there and essentially runs there as well. Awesome. This means that right now we have the orders list implemented as well, which you can see right here. If I refresh, this comes from the server, renders on the server, and then on the client as well. If I go here, then it renders from the server as well. If I try to check the view page source and try to go down here, you can see all the items, their prices as well, coming from the server, as you can see. And that essentially almost wraps up our entire application. But I want to do just one last thing, and that is not allowing the orders page to be accessed if the user is not logged in at all. And also when we log out, we need to redirect to the login page, or we need to redirect to the home page. So first, let's tackle the logout case. So in here, I'm going to go to header.component.ts, and in here, we should have the router at the top. So we don't have it. We can actually rather go to the auth service here, and here we should have the router injected. So here we can say router equals inject, and here we can say router. This should come from Angular/router. And then I'm going to go to the logout component here, or the logout function here. And once this is signed out, I can say this dot router dot navigate, and in here I can provide it slash, or I can say auth/login rather. So let's save this now. Now let's say if I'm logged in, and if I try to go and say log out, it takes me automatically to the login page. I could go back to products from here, which is fine. But if I try to go back and try to go back on orders, I can essentially still get that data, which is not good. So we should not be able to go to that page at all. If I refresh, of course, you can see that now it says user not authenticated, but that makes sense. But we are going to stop it using the AuthGuard in the front end side as well. So for this, I'm going to go into pet market web, and inside app auth, I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to say open in integrated terminal. In here, I'm going to say nx generate guard, and I'm going to call this AuthGuard. Let's quickly run this with dry run to see where this ends up. I'm going to use schematics Angular guard, and I'm going to use the can activate one in this case. So can activate. And now you can see that this would end up in the auth folder itself, which is what I want. So I'm going to remove the dry run flag and run this again. I'm going to use schematics Angular guard, can activate, and now we have the AuthGuard AuthGuard here. Now in here, you can see that we have the route here and we have the state here as well. So what I want to do here is I want to check if the user's ID token is available. If it's not, then that means that the user is not logged in. So here, I'm just gonna quickly go ahead and inject the service. So const auth, and here I can say inject, and here I can say auth service, just like this. Then I'm gonna say return, and here I can say auth.get token. If that's the case, then it should just work. So I'm gonna save this now, and then I'm gonna go to approutes.ts, and then I'm gonna go to the orders route here, and I'm going to say here that it should be having can activate, and in here, this is gonna take an array, and I'm going to say here it's gonna be authGuard, just like this. Now let's quickly save this route, and I'm also going to change a couple of things here as well. I'm gonna go back to the page here, and here you can see we still can go to this page, and I'm gonna quickly go to the authGuard to debug what's happening here. If I refresh now, it should come here, and now it takes the auth here, and then it returns, and it doesn't do anything at all. It keeps the page right here. Ideally, what should have happened is it should have redirected somewhere else. So here I should be able to say router equals inject, and here we say router, and not from Express, but actually from Angular router, just like this. Then I should be able to say const, and here I can say token equals, and here I should be able to say await auth.get token, just like this. But I also need to then make this function async like this. Now that we have the token here, I'll say if we don't have the token, then we should say router.navigate, and in here it should send back to auth/login, and then it should also return false from here. Otherwise, this should just return true, and not true, but just true. And let's try this out now. I'm gonna hit play now. It's gonna come here to the auth service, come here to the router, try to get the token. You can see that the token is null. It comes here, then it should navigate to the auth login page and then return false from here. And you can see that now it goes to the login page, right? Now let's say I try to do this again. I go here, and then I'm gonna disable the breakpoints here. Now I'm gonna try to go to orders page again. So orders, and if I hit enter now, you can see that it takes me to auth login. It doesn't allow me to go to orders page at all. Now if I try to log in with Google, and you can see now I'm logged in. If I try to go to orders now, it allows me to go because I have the ID token available there. Now if I try to log out, you're gonna see that it takes me to auth login. If I click back now to go back to orders, no, it doesn't allow me. It keeps redirecting me to auth login, or it essentially just skips the orders path completely, which is what we wanted. So you can also save your routes or guard your routes based on if the user is authenticated or not. And we created a simple guard that essentially you can use in all the routes that you want protected, so to say. Well, with that said, we are almost at the end of the tutorial. We do have some console logs that are still hanging around, so we need to remove those. So we're gonna find console log, and we're going to see how many are we using at the moment. It looks like 19 of them. Great. So I'm gonna remove this one here, and let's remove this as well. We're gonna remove these as well, and then in the auth service we remove this guy. We also set this guy, and we also have token from get token method. Let's actually keep this one for now. We also will remove this guy from here, and token in order stores as well. So remove this guy, and we'll keep the unpaid order deleted just for the sake of testing it potentially. So I'm gonna save all my files that I've just updated, and now we are going to commit the code. Make sure we are not really pushing the code at all at the moment, because we are going to create a different branch from it. So I'm gonna quickly review the code. I can see that for some reason the service account JSON actually ended up in here, which means that I already committed it for some reason, but you should not have this. And if you mistakenly did, then you need to remove this file, git add dot commit, and then come back again. So I'm gonna actually remove the file, and I'm going to add it again, but let's see the other files that we have here. Okay, I don't see any issues, so we're gonna say git add dot, and here we can say git commit -m, and let's call it feed orders, and we can say get authenticated orders. Now you can of course be more gracious with your comment and explain what you actually did. I don't have to, so I'm just gonna quickly go ahead with this. Now that I've added this, I can essentially go ahead and bring back the service account JSON file. So I'm gonna quickly create a new file here called service-account.json, and I'm gonna paste the code here that I just copied before. Okay, it seems like it still says that this file is there, which means that we did not really did it correctly. Oh, I see what's wrong. The dot is the issue. So here it should be like this. And now you can see that this grayed out, which makes sense. I'm going to double check that this is the name as well. So I'm going to try to find this in the project. And I can see that the Firebase service.ts essentially uses the right name. So this should be good. So I can just say git add dot and say git commit amend, just like this, and colon WQ. There we go. And now we have the commit ready. Now that we have the whole project almost done, we are going to improve the deployment process. So at the root of the project, I want you to create a file called deploy.sh. So we are going to write some bash script. So we're going to start with the hash bang, so to say, and we're going to say bin/bash. Then we are going to say if anything fails, we essentially exit with a non-zero status, so to say. So we say set -e. Then we can also say echo. Here we can say starting deployment process dot. Then first we are going to install the root dependency. So we can simply say npm install, and we can also echo something here calling running npm install in root dot. Then we are going to navigate to the backend and we are going to start building the backend itself. So we're going to do cd apps/pet market be. Then we are going to generate the Prisma client. So you can keep these comments or just remove them. I don't really think we should be having them. So we can now generate the Prisma client by running npx prisma generate. Then we are going to build the application. So we are going to build the backend app by running npx nx build pet market be. So we build the backend application. Then we want to copy a couple of files. We want to copy the env file that we have for backend, and we also want to copy the ecosystem file. So here you're going to see that in the pet market be, we have this env file, and we also have this ecosystem config.js, which essentially runs the main.js via pm2. So this is important. So I'm going to quickly echo this first, and then we can copy both of these files by doing cp.env, moving it to the dist folder, and then copying the ecosystem config.js and moving it to the dist folder just like this. Now we need to go inside the dist folder and basically start the pm2 process. So we're going to navigate to the dist directory by doing cd dist. Then we're going to basically stop and delete if there's a process running, because whenever we deploy a new release, we need to stop the existing server and we need to essentially build, or we already have built the backend here, but we need to stop the existing process, delete the existing process, the backend process, and we need to start a new one. In here, we're going to run pm2 stop backend, because if you see the name of the application here, it's called backend. So it's going to go and basically stop the backend service, or we are saying true. And the reason for that is that we want to continue even if this stop essentially fails. So let's put it above here. Once that's done, we also want to do pm2 delete backend and true as well. So here we can say stop or delete fails. After this, we want to start the new process. So we are going to run the pm2 with the ecosystem config file here. So we can say pm2 start, and then we can say ecosystem.config.js. Remember that right now we are in the dist folder in the Linux server in Cloudways. Once we have run the process here, we need to verify that the process is running. So we are going to run pm2 describe backend, which should essentially log the values, or which should actually log the description or information about this backend process that we are running via pm2. And if it really doesn't, then it will throw an error. So that's also important. So the script then breaks in that case. Once this is done, we are going to essentially go to the front end part here. So you can say front end. So we are going to go and we are going to go back to the project root. So remember, we are right now at the dist folder inside the pet market be folder. So in the beginning, we went inside apps pet market be. Now we are in apps pet market be dist. So we go out from here. We simply go here and say cd // which means we are going to be at the root of the public HTML folder. Then we are going to run building the front-end application, and we are going to do that by running npx nx build pet market web, just like this. Now you need to also understand that in this particular situation as well, we should have the env variable set automatically beforehand. So we need to set up the env variable values beforehand. But I'm going to show you how to do that when we are going to deploy in a few minutes. Now, just like the ecosystem file in the backend, we also have one in the front end as well. So if I open the web folder here, you can see ecosystem config.js, and here you can see that we have the variables as well, and we run the server.mjs file. So we're going to copy this file now in the dist folder that is respective to the front end project. In this case, we are going to do a fallback. So we are going to run mkdirp just in case this folder was not created. In usual cases, it should be there, so we don't really have to use this, but I'm going to put it anyways. Now we are going to copy this particular JavaScript file, which is what I just showed you, which is this one, ecosystem config.js, from apps pet market web ecosystem config.js to dist apps pet market web, and then in the server folder. This is important. Now that we have copied the files, we essentially need to navigate to the front end dist directory, and we are going to basically run the pm2 process, or stop, delete, and run the pm2 process there as well. So we are going to navigate to dist apps pet market web and then the server folder, which is what we have been using so far. Now we are going to stop and delete the existing front-end PM processes. So we are first going to run pm2 stop front-end, and then we are going to run the pm2 delete front-end as well. Finally, we can start the pm2 process using the ecosystem file. So again, right now we are in this server folder. So we are going to run pm2 start ecosystem config.js, which should run the right file. And then we verify the front-end process just like we did with the backend. So if I move up here, we're just going to copy this, paste it here, and call it front end. Finally, we go back to the project root. So cd // and then we just say deployment script finished and exit 0. Easy peasy. Now that we have this, we are going to commit this code. So we are going to say git status. Let's quickly add the file. So git add dot, and now we can say git commit m, and here we can say chore deploy, and here we can say add deployment script. Now that we have these commits ready, you can see that I have 4 commits that I can push to checkpoint 2, but I want to create a different branch so I can make a difference between checkpoint 2 and checkpoint 2 final. So you can work with checkpoint 2, of course. So here I can say git checkout -b checkpoint -2 final, and then I'm going to push this particular branch to GitHub. Now that we have this set up, let's actually deploy to Cloudways. So I'm going to go to my Cloudways dashboard, just like before. We can essentially go to our servers. I'm going to quickly click here, copy the password. And if I do an ls here, you can see that we have the dist here. We also have the apps here. So all of these things should be here. What we should be concerned here about is we should have the environment variables set up correctly. But even before doing anything like that, we need to pull the code. So we need to click here in the application that we created before. So click here, then go to the deployment via Git, and then here go down and select the checkpoint 2 final, which I can't see at the moment here. So I need to fetch. And now if I check, I can see the checkpoint 2 final. So let's quickly do a pull here. All right, so here you can see that the repository has been updated. Nice. If I now go back to my terminal here and I do LSA here, you can see that we should have the deploy sh here as well. If I do cat deploy sh, you can see our file that we just created. So we have the front end here, we have all the echoes and basically the whole script here. So things should be good now. Now, if I also do PM2 list here, you should be able to see that the processes are running. We have the backend, we have the front end. And if I go back to my Cloudways here and look at the access details, I can essentially click this particular page. And here you can see that we have the existing deployment that we did before, which just has the products, no authentication whatsoever, and the homepage was not implemented. So we are going to deploy a new version now. But as I mentioned before doing anything, we essentially need to have the environment variables correctly set up. So now if I do ls here and lsa here, we don't have an env variable here, but if I go to apps and I go to pet market be, and if I do ls-a here, you can see that we have this env file. Now let's quickly open the file. If I do vim env here, now you can see here that we have the database URL, the Stripe secret, and the front end URL. If you remember, we added a new database URL, which was the staging URL. So we are essentially going to add that value here now. Now, if I try to go to the backend folder here, and if I go to the backend env file, you're going to see that we have the values here, and we have a database URL right here, which is production. This one is staging, and this one is localhost. So I'm going to actually copy all of these values, and now I'm going to go into my editor and I'm going to replace all of this as well. And now if you see here, I've also added some comments like this is the production URL, this is the development URL that we are using right now, and then this is the local one that I don't really use. So I'm going to actually save this file now, which means that we are still working with our development database and not production in this case as well. And we are going to switch to production really soon. But what we also want is to work with the front end environment variables as well. Now, if I go to pet market web and go inside the env variable here, you can see that we have all the variables for Firebase here. So I'm going to copy all the values here, and then I'm going to do cd ... and cd ... here. And now what I can do is I can go to apps, pet market web. And here, if I do ls-a, you can see that we don't have the env file. So we are going to add one. So vim.env. And now I can paste the values. And now I have the values. I can just do :wq to save these files. So make sure you know how to exit vim. If you don't, you're going to be doomed. So now I can just save this file. And now we are ready to run the deployment script. Are you ready to try it out? Let's see how this looks. So I'm going to do cd ... cd ... and here we are going to run sh deploy.sh. Let's run it. So you can see that right now it's running npm install in the root. Now you can see that it ran the npm install and it also generated the Prisma client as well, which is nice. And now it's building the backend app. All right, so you see we got an issue here, and that is it cannot resolve the service account JSON. So we missed a step. So we also need to pass the value of service account JSON in here as well. So let's quickly go to cd, and here we can say apps pet market be, and in here we are going to create the service account JSON. So let's do vim, and here we can say service-account.json, and we're going to go to our code base and go inside pet market be, and here we have the service account JSON. Now I can copy the values from here and go back to vim and paste the values, and I can quickly do :wq to save this file, and now I can do cd ... and I can run the deploy script again. All right, so it installed all the packages, then generated the Prisma client, and then also ran the pet market be build, which successfully got generated with the service account now. now. And then you can see that it is stopped and deleted the backend PM2 processes. So it stopped it first, then it deleted it. So only the front end got remaining, right? Now you can see the application's backend not running. Now it started the new backend service, which should be nice now. And then it also ran the describe. And here you can see the log or the description of the backend process running on PM2. Now it goes inside and tries to also run the front end application. And this should work with the new env variables as well. So let's wait while the application is being built. All right. So then it also went ahead with the front end project as well. And here you can see all of the variables got loaded from the env file, which is what we wanted. Then it stopped the front end process, then it deleted it, and then it restarted the front end process. Then it verified that the front end process is running. And finally, it just says deployment script finished. Yay! Smooth as it can be. Now let's actually try if everything worked and if we can see the application working. Now, if I try to go back to Cloudways and try to go to my application, and if I click this now, you can see that this is still shows the old application, and that means something is wrong. So what I can do is I can go back to my Linux server, and here let's quickly check the dist folder because we built the application, right? So if I do ls, we only have pet market web there. Now if I go here and say let's check out pre-rendered routes.json, it doesn't have anything. If I go to server and if I go here, we can't really check all these mjs files. I think that's going to be really difficult. So if I do server.amjs, yeah, can't really do that. But let's check at the Angular app engine manifest. So let's do cat Angular app engine manifest mjs. So these are the entry points, right? Now we can also check the Angular app manifest or Angular app manifest mjs. And here you can see we have render mode 0 for home, a bunch of other paths as well. But I don't really see orders here, which is a bit interesting. So we don't have login, we don't have sign up, which means that this is still trying to show or render the old code. And that's not good. So what I will do right now is that I'll try to do this manually at least, or I'll change it to do just the front end part for now. But we are going to fix that in our actual deploy script. So let's do cd here and here. And now we are at public HTML. Let's quickly go to the deploy.sh here. We're going to quickly select from here to the end of the backend here. And we're going to delete this for now. And then when we go back to the front end, we are essentially going to delete the folder completely because it seems like it actually did not do it. So we are going to say here, we can say rm/r, and here we can go ahead and say dist, just like this. So it's going to delete the root dist folder which has the pet market web, or we can say dist and then apps and then pet market web. So we need to ensure that that is deleted. So let's quickly run :wq, and now we're just going to run the deploy sh to deploy the front end. So let's do sh deploy.sh. Okay, so it says this is not a directory. What did we miss? If I do dist apps, then we have pet market web. I think maybe it's because of the dot here. So let's quickly remove that. Let's do :wq, and we are going to run this again. Okay, it says it still can't do it. That's interesting. So we do dist apps pet market web. If I run the command from here now, it essentially says it is a directory. If I do with an R here, it actually removes that, but it doesn't really allow me to do it via the script. That's interesting. If I do cd dist now, and if I do ls, we have apps here. If I do ls, we don't have there anything now. Let's try to run the command again. And here it says still cannot remove this file or folder. All right, let's have a quick look at the deploy sh file. All right, I can see the problem. Here we have the cd ... So we don't really want that. So let's do vim deploy.sh. And here we need to remove this part as well. And then we can do wq, and then we can run the deploy sh normally. So sh deploy sh, and it still tries to say no file or directory, but that's fine because we already basically removed it. If you wanted to test it out, you can also do something like mkdir-p, and here you can say dist apps pet-market-web, and the directory is created now. So if you run deploy sh, it should not cry, and you can see that this works fine now. Good. So while this is running, I'm gonna go to my code base, and we are going to go to the deploy sh to ensure that that works fine. So if I go here where we start the front end code, we essentially need to run from here the deletion of this particular folder. We're going to also commit this in the meantime. So git add dot, git commit m, and here we can say fix deploy, remove the front end folder before building, and then we can just hit commit, and we can also push it. Now let's wait for the app to be built. All right, so you can see that we have the application built now. You can also see that the process started, restarted, and we also verified it as well. Now let's try to go and see if this was built correctly. So if I do cd dist apps pet market web, and if I go to server folder, and then if I do ls here, we can quickly see the content of Angular app manifest.mjs. Nest.js. Here now you can see that we have the auth login, auth sign up, orders, and everything seems fine. So in theory, if I go back to my browser and if I try to open it again, it doesn't really look like it worked. What happened? This is super weird. I'm gonna quickly try the hard reload here as well. So I'm gonna go to application, storage, clear site data, and refresh. And I still see that we don't really have that as working. If I do disable cache and if I refresh now, I can try to see that this chunk essentially comes from memory cache still. And if I try to clear all of this, go back here and then refresh again, I see a lot of chunks are still from the memory cache. Interesting. And having said that, I think the only thing that could then work is restarting the server entirely. And that's probably the last step. So let's quickly try that. So I'm going to go ahead and restart the server. It says it's going to take 3 minutes. So let's see. All right. So the server has been restarted. I'm going to quickly go ahead and copy the password from here. I'm going to go back to my terminal, SSH into it, paste the password. Now let's quickly go and do pm2 list. You're going to see that nothing should be running at the moment, as you can see. So what I will do is I'm also going to go to the application and I'm actually going to pull the code because I pushed one deploy sh change. So I'm going to go to deploy via git and then let's quickly do a pull. And if we want, we can also fetch, but I'm just going to do pull. All right. So now this has been updated. I can quickly go inside the apps and then the folder and then inside public HTML. And inside, if I do cat deploy.sh, you can see that we have the RMR thing here. So this should be fine. Now all I need to run is sh deploy sh. Let's quickly do that. And you can already see that this has made things quite easy for us and we don't really have to run manually all of this. So let's just wait while this finishes. In the meantime, if I go back to my Cloudways here and go to the application and go to access details and try to access the app, you're going to see that the service is unavailable. So nothing is working at the moment. So I'll just wait and let this finish. All right. So you can see the whole process finished. So we had the backend being generated. Then we also got the front end being generated here as well. And then we also got the processes running as well. So here we have both of them online. If we try to go ahead and say pm2 logs, we should be able to see logs for both the front end and the back end, just like this. And now if I go back to the front end application and refresh now, it's loading at the moment. And there we go. We have the production app ready. So all I needed to do was to restart the Cloudways server. I'm pretty sure they would be able to do it without us restarting, but I'm not really sure what happened there. So in here, now we have the home page. We have the featured products here as well. I can add them to the cart as well. I can go to the cart. I can proceed to checkout. I can pay with the Stripe. That should take me to the Stripe dashboard. And if I go back to the database right now and go here and reload, you're going to see that we have 2 orders now. We don't have a user ID for the second one because we are not logged in at the moment, but this one is payment required. So if I go here and then I click back, this should be deleted. So if I go here and reload, you're going to see that this should be deleted if everything worked fine. And here it did not. So here you can see we made a mistake and we left the localhost variable in our env file, which was stupid. So I'm going to quickly fix that. But even before going there, I want to check one more thing, and that is logging in. If I log in right now, does it allow me to log in via Google? Let's try it out. So I'm going to click this now, and you're going to see that this doesn't really allow me to log in. If I right click, go to inspect and go to console, you're going to see that here we have unauthorized domain. This is something that we need to fix. And for that, you need to go to authentication and you need to go in the settings here. And then if you scroll down, you're going to see authorized domains. In here, you need to add the domain. So click add domain, go back to your Cloudways dashboard or the link here, and you can copy this entire link. Now go back to your console here and then paste the domain here and hit add. And now you'll see that this particular domain has been added. It would just take a few minutes and then it should be able to log in from the production URL. And now I want to try it quickly. So if I click login now, go to continue with Google, you can see that now this should allow us to log in. And there you see it is working on production and I am logged in right here. If I go to the application tab here and look at the cookies, we'll also see that the PHP stack or this URL right now should have the PM session as well. So we have the token right here as well, which means that if I try to go to orders, I should be able to get the orders myself just like this. So you can see the orders coming in as well. If I refresh now, you're going to see that we should see the orders and quickly then the front end kicks in or the hydration happens and then we still get the orders as well. If I right click here, go back to the page source, and if I click this, you're going to see that we should be able to have the orders here as well. So you see in production, we have the server side rendered orders information just like this. Super cool. So the only thing I would fix is I'm going to copy this URL here and you can see all my logs here as well. But regardless, let's quickly quit this. And then we are going to go to the backend folder. So pet market be. I'm going to say vim.env. And now I'm going to quickly replace the value of the frontend URL. Make sure that you remove the slash from the end and then do a colon WQ queue, so this gets saved. Now we can quickly go ahead and copy the value of the env file in the dist folder. So we'll do cp and here we'll say .env and then /dist, just like this. Then we're going to go to the dist folder, and in here we are going to restart the process. So we are going to say pm2 stop backend, then we'll do pm2 delete backend as well. And now we are going to say pm2 start, and we are going to provide the echo system.config.js. Now you can see that the backend is working fine. Let's actually try this out. So I'm going to go to my cart now and I'm going to refresh, and I'm hoping that this should work. So if I go to checkout, pay with Stripe, and then I go back, you can see that it lands me on the PHP stack, or essentially the Cloudways URL, which is the production URL. So we fixed the issue by just replacing the env variable. Awesome. And just to confirm, in this particular case, we should not have any additional order created. Now this order, which was mistakenly created, could not be solved, but I'm gonna just copy the ID here still to delete it. But if I reload, you're gonna see that this would still be here, right? Now if I go to this particular production URL with this order ID that I just copied, which is the second one, and then if I just hit enter, it's going to still remove the order because we canceled the payment on this order. If I go to Neon console now, reload here, you're gonna see that that gets removed, and also any related order items would be removed as well. The only ones that we have right here are potentially of this particular order, as you can see here. Well, with that said, we are actually done with our entire course here. We do have the home working, we have the products working, we do have the search products working as well. We can add items to cart, we can go and check the shopping cart as well. We can see the order summary, we can pay with Stripe. We also can log in and save orders of the user as well. And we also implemented things like when you log out, you essentially go back to login. If you try to go to the orders page as well, it won't allow you because of the AuthGuard. So if I hit enter now, you're going to see that this would still take me to the auth login page and will not allow me to go to the orders page. So we implemented everything, we deployed everything, and this is a production ready application working that essentially can be used by users. Of course, we are using the Stripe's test environment at the moment, and we don't have the ability to add or remove products, but I think that's something trivial that you can build on top of the architecture and the system that we have right here. One last thing that I want to show you before we end everything is essentially moving to production in terms of database as well. If you remember, in Neon console, we essentially are using this feature branch of the database. We're not really working with the main branch, but since we have tested everything on this feature branch, we can essentially go and make the decision on the main branch now. For that, you can essentially just go ahead and do vim env inside the dist folder for the backend application. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say database URL development. I'm just going to comment it, and then I'm going to go above and I'm going to uncomment the production URL. I'm just going to do a :wq in this particular case. And now I'm going to go and do cd ... I'm also going to go and change the same thing here as well. So let's quickly do vim.env. I'm going to uncomment the production URL and comment the database URL here. If you're not really familiar with Vim, I would rather recommend to use nano. So just do a nano.env and you can open that and then edit that easily. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save this file. And now what I want to do is to check the Prisma status. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say npx Prisma migrate status. And we should have some migrations that are not really applied to production. And we are going to see those migrations right here. So here you can see now 3 migrations found in the Prisma migrations. They have not been applied yet. So if I want to apply this in development, I would run npx Prisma migrate dev or Prisma migrate deploy in production. Now, if I just restart the server with the new env changes that I've just done in the dist folder, it will point to the database, which is essentially the production database, but the server logs would show that we have some issues going there. So since we have already tested this in the dev environment, we can essentially just run the migrate deploy. But if you want to see those errors, what you could do is to go in the dist folder here, and then you can restart the server. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go ahead and say pm2 restart backend. And now it should have restarted the backend server, right? Now I'm going to do pm2 logs and let's see. And now you can see that the application at least was built nicely. If I try to go to production right now and try to log in with my Google account, here you can see that we got the feature products, pretty nice. But what happens if I go to the order page? So if I go to orders here, you can see that we get loading and then we get an error. And that is exactly what I expected to happen because we don't really have this payment required in production database yet. So we need to actually run the deploy script in order for this to work. And you can see the logs here as well when you run pm2 log. So this is the error that we are having right now. So I'm just going to do control C here. And then what we can do is to do cd.dot. And here we can quickly go ahead and run npx prisma migrate status. I just really like to do this before actually doing something on production, which I think we should always be careful about. And you can see that here it says we have 3 migrations to deploy. So I can run now npx prisma migrate deploy. Now, before I actually run that, I can go back to branches and I can show you that in our main, which is default right now, we don't have the same thing in the tables. For example, if you go to the records here, you may not find that particular enum, or you cannot find that in the schema essentially. But regardless, let's try to run this deploy command to the production database, and then we are going to see if the app really works. Now for this particular change, I think just running the deploy should be fine. We don't probably need to restart the server even, and this should work out of the box. So now that the migrations have been applied, as you can see now, I can essentially go back to my application now, and if I refresh now, it should work out of the box. Now you can see that there are no orders found for this particular user because we have changed the database. So we only have the order for this particular user in the development database, but not in production. So that only makes sense. But everything else is working as expected, and you're free to explore more, add more features to it, and even ask questions from me in the chat, and I can maybe give you some suggestions. Or if you have any suggestions that I missed, or if I did a mistake, or if you would have done things differently, let me know in the comments as well. Well, with that said, we are actually wrapping up finally this whole tutorial. This took a lot of time, a lot of nights for me trying to record the whole tutorial time and again. I failed sometimes, I got stuck sometimes as well, but eventually figured things out and tried my best to put this in a way that's easy to understand and also follow, and to make sure that you end up in a situation that's exactly same as mine. So you end up with an application that actually is deployed to production and works. Well, let me know in the comments what you feel about this whole course. Were you able to follow it completely? Did you get stuck? If you would have done things differently, as I said, and if there's anything else that you want to learn from me when it comes to Angular, NestJS, full stack web development, throw your ideas in the comments and I will be happy to take a note of them and maybe potentially working on them as well. As I mentioned before, I've already started working on an Angular signals book, which will cover a lot of core topics about Angular signals. And trust me, that's actually one of the biggest things that you would want to learn when it comes to Angular going forward from Angular 19, on how to work with signals essentially, or HTTP resource, etc. And I'm also potentially going to work on more books, more courses. So I want you to subscribe to the newsletter if you have not already, and you can find the link in the description of this video. Finally, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to this channel, and also consider becoming a member if you want to support my work and if you align yourself with providing free education as much as possible. With that said, I want to give a quick shout out to Cloudways for sponsoring 2 of the videos of this tutorial series that really helped me working on this and also motivated me to work on the course as well. And with that said, as always, happy coding. I'm going to see you next time.